This mountain kid is just lying there watching the clouds when an old man approaches. The old man warns that a monster is closing in. The kid doesn't even flinch. He doesn't even bother sitting up. A few hours later, Tran catches the scent of blood. He heads into the woods and finds old man Rabbus lying there, dead. The monster was real after all. Staring at this gruesome scene, he feels absolutely nothing. Still no fear. That is when the beast returns, a massive, terrifying demon tiger. A dark aura rolls off it like black smoke, but the moment it roars, the tiger actually backs off. Its raw instincts are screaming that this human is dangerous. Playing it safe, the beast hesitates. Tran realizes the creature isn't coming closer. So he calmly pulls out a small stone and loads it into a leather sling. His eyes light up. That's magic. The next shot violently tears the air apart. A strike so brutal it obliterates the beast in one shot, and through it all, Tran doesn't even blink. It is strange because 8 years ago when he was 10 years old, he was already casting magic. His mother caught him levitating objects, which terrified her. She made him promise to keep it a secret from everyone. The reasoning behind her terror was simple. Everyone believed that mages carried the divine blood of the Freyans, so they saw themselves as gods above mere humans. Even the strongest warriors, the knights, are treated like slaves by them. That was when his mother revealed the truth. His father was a knight. If the mages ever discovered their bloodline had slipped into someone like Tran, it wouldn't just be an inconvenience. It would mean a war they'd start just to erase him. Mages are never born from common blood, period. So Tran grows up alone at the edge of some village. His mother is long dead. The morning after he obliterates the beast with a rock, the villagers gather at his doorstep like an angry mob. Seeking a scapegoat, they want a culprit for Rabbus murder, and Tran is their target. He can't even process how fast they jump to conclusions. Then a man grabs his collar, shouting right in his face. They all believe he killed the old man and is trying to blame some imaginary monster. Tran is completely done being polite. He tells them straight up they're pathetic. The first guy snaps and throws a punch. Tran slips it without even looking annoyed, then pauses for a split second. He decides these fools only understand one language. A solid headbutt and the guy is out cold. The next villager raises a club and drops like a heavy sack of bricks. Another tries to strike him, but Tran grabs his arm, forcing him to taste his own fist. One by one, they all go down humiliated. Grown men defeated by an 18-year-old. The women are standing there too, but none of them want any part of this fight. Tran walks back inside when another knock sounds at his door. He's already annoyed, but this time it's not a villager but a tall man with a powerful presence. He's polite too and mentions he's traveled a long way to get here. Tran is about to point him toward the village, telling him he's going the wrong way, when the stranger's stomach lets out a massive growl. A few minutes later, the man is sitting at Tran's table happily eating. That's when things get interesting. They start talking about how Tran's lived alone his entire life, never once leaving this mountain, yet the traveler notices something. Tran eats like someone who was actually raised with manners. Tran explains that his mother raised him here all alone, teaching him everything. He knows she passed away from sickness years ago. Then, the traveler drops a bombshell. He is a mage sent to hunt a high-ranked beast nearby. Tran keeps his cool and mentions the old man's corpse. The mage begins putting the puzzle together out loud, noting that Tran does not act like someone living next door to danger. No fear, not even a flinch. His voice turns deadly serious, asking Tran one chilling question. Who is he really? Flashback to a young Tran asking his mother why no one can ever find out he is a mage. She explains it is because of the wicked nobles, which only confuses the young boy. She tells him that if nobles are the shepherds, then the knights are their sheep. She says those nobles might treat their flock with love like family, but they won't hesitate to sell or sacrifice them if they must. She warns him she doesn't want that kind of life for him, asking if he wants to stay by her side. When the boy eagerly agrees, she says that in this case, he must never let anyone discover he is a mage. She warns him that other mages especially would do whatever it takes to rip them apart and make him a sheep if they ever found out the truth. She finishes by warning him that to protect his secret, he might even have to kill. It is clear that Tran has now reached a point where his entire life is about to be tested. Tran realizes this traveler is trying to trap him. The traveler notices the young shepherd has gone completely silent. Smiling, the stranger says the joke is no fun if he keeps wearing that face. too. Tran, this is no laughing matter, so he makes it clear that he has zero sense of humor for these kinds of things. Playing it cool, Tran says it is the very first time he has ever heard a joke about mages. The traveler apologizes, laughing that Tran's stiff expression was just too perfect, so he could not resist teasing him. The stranger introduces himself as Kior, a nomad. After sharing names, Tran and Korn shake hands. Both of them find it intriguing to form an unexpected connection like this, with the table piled high with food. They keep talking, sharing tales about their histories and their ages. The 18-year-old and 65-year-old chat about how slowly mages age. Tran asks how the old man ended up wandering the world. Kior explains that after serving a great noble family for 65 years, he decided to pack up and travel. It had been a very long time since Tran enjoyed such an easy, innocent conversation, especially with someone this warm. The boy had never realized that simply talking to a stranger could be so enjoyable. They get so swept up in their chatting that they fail to notice the morning sun rising. After their pleasant talk, the nomad tosses a silver coin onto the table, saying it should easily cover the meal. Tran happily accepts the payment and wishes his new companion good luck on his hunt. Korn insists they avoid saying final goodbyes, promising to drop by for a visit whenever he is nearby. To see him again when passing through, the scene shifts to a quiet, rural town blanketed in lush green trees and open fields. Once again, we spot the young shepherd calling his flock together. His sheep always listen to his voice, obeying his commands instantly. As the flock heads toward their pens, Tran is lost in deep thought, realizing he has never met anyone quite like him. Anyone quite like Korn before. He genuinely enjoyed their talk and the night's easygoing humor was surprisingly comforting. Tran walked away with an incredibly positive impression of Korn, viewing him as far superior to any adult he had ever encountered. As he rounded up his herd, Tran quietly reminded himself that noble knights were merely mindless hunting dogs serving corrupt, greedy nobles. He figured they would likely never meet again, especially with no more monsters remaining in the territory. However, it was not long before the wandering hunter noticed the silence. Himself, Kior found tracks of a brutal clash, yet he detected no presence of any monsters nearby. Clearly, the resident beast had already been slain, leaving fresh scars from a fierce battle scattered across the clearing. Gazing up at the damaged branches, he wondered if the chief hired another Mage besides himself. Regardless, with the threats eliminated, this village area should return to peace. But suddenly his senses picked up a crushing aura that made his veteran hunter eyes widen. He scanned the dense tree line frantically, desperately trying to trace the source of this heavy pressure. The beast possessed giant paws, and its raw aura was completely terrifying. The fiend looked monstrous, reeked of blood, and held enough mana to battle for over 2 days straight. This aberration was undoubtedly a monster specter, leaving the experienced hunter wondering what kind of monster could have spawned such horror. But there was zero time to waste. If he remained here any longer, the beast would surely capture him. The lethal clash erupted as the giant swung its devastating paw, forcing him to leap backward to avoid it. His opening move was lightning fast, evading the strike almost instantly. Facing the raging beast, Kior remembered that if a hunter fails to cleanse the residual mana from a fallen beast, it inevitably becomes a specter. Every skilled monster hunting wizard knew this crucial rule. Meanwhile, the battle raged on. There was no doubt that a powerful mage defeated the original beast. However, Korn could not fathom why they had abandoned the corpse like that, or if they genuinely lacked that basic knowledge. Evading several more attacks, he prepared a counterattack, knowing a rookie knight could never hope to withstand this level of threat. There was definitely a deeper mystery behind this bizarre situation, but his immediate duty was to eliminate the beast. He readied a concentrated mana spear, determined to destroy this cursed specter once and for all. Yet in a shocking twist, his deadly strike dissolved completely before it could even reach the beast. He realized its dark magic was far superior to his own. Without warning, the aberration dissolved into dark liquid mud and vanished entirely. Kior realized the beast possessed high levels of intelligence, actively trying to manipulate magic using its dark energy. Instantly, the specter began hunting the veteran warrior. The colossal entity materialized directly behind him, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. However, the veteran tracker quickly sensed the incoming blow, dodging at the last second. This Beast was far beyond Kior's capability. Only a skilled, mid-ranking noble could conquer it. Right in the middle of their chaotic exchange, Kior ended up getting struck. He never imagined facing such a terrifying, high-level specter in a quiet village. Trapped in this hopeless crisis, he accepted his grim life is full of surprises. Even so, he makes it clear to the beast that he won't just close his eyes and die. Gritting his teeth, he decides that if he is going down, he is taking the beast with him. Kior focuses every drop of mana into his hand, planning to pierce the monster the second it strikes. Since this giant is deadly serious, his timing has to be absolutely flawless. With his power concentrated in his palm, he prepares to unleash a devastating blast of fire. This is the final showdown between man and beast, where only one can survive. Suddenly, a brilliant blue light flashes in the distance. Before the hunter can even launch his assault, someone else beats him to the punch, striking the beast first. He is left speechless, staring at the scene in utter disbelief. In an instant, the giant beast collapses to the ground, defeated without Korn lifting a single finger. He scans the area, trying to figure out who just saved his life. Then he is startled by a voice joking that his shepherd's story was actually pretty good. But this rescue definitely came at a better time. His savior is the young traveler he was journeying with, now stepping forward with absolute confidence. Kiran finds it bizarre. They talked all night, yet the kid never mentioned being Mage. Curious, he demands to know why he hid his incredible powers earlier. The young man shrugs, casually pointing out that he could have easily left him behind to die. Still, he remembers the kindness this hunter showed him, despite them being total strangers. He remembered the day the man chased off a wolf, terrorizing the local sheep. Back then, he had asked why the hunter went so far out of his way to help strangers. They even discussed how much money a powerful person could make. But the hunter's simple answer left the young man completely baffled, as he explained he only helped because he put himself in other people's shoes. He spoke of the vulnerable border folk, trembling in fear with absolutely zero protection. Tran had a totally different outlook back then, arguing that possessing power did not obligate anyone to defend the weak. The hunter replied that mages inherit their gift from a god, so they ought to live proudly and shield the commoners. In reality, though, not every sorcerer shared that ideal, and everyone lived by their own code and beliefs. That is why Tan threw those exact words right back, saying, everyone has their own way of living. Mid-conversation, they were suddenly caught completely off guard by a massive surge of energy. The veteran warned Tran to listen closely, telling him they stood no chance against this beast. He explained that unless you were a noble, fighting such a beast was utterly impossible. Staring directly into the creature's massive green eyes, he told Tran to alert the village chief and evacuate everyone. He promised to hold the line alone, putting on a brave face despite knowing he stood no real chance against the beast. Tran seemingly listened, but at the exact same time, he noticed the air itself beginning to shift. A simple stone started vibrating, rapidly charging with mana. The veteran looked over, suddenly realizing this young warrior hiding in the mountains could easily hunt beasts that even nobles would struggle with. The veteran knight Kion thought. He stared in total shock. What he was witnessing right now was no mere simple connection formed in some backwater village. It wasn't just the bravery of a young rogue knight fleeing the nobility either. This scene unfolding before him looked like the rise of a mage who would change the entire world. Now Tran stood directly before the monster, claiming he had always wanted to see where his limits lay. The knight replied that as incredible as Tran's talent was, this monster was still far too powerful. He warned the boy they had to work together to survive. Suddenly, a massive strike was thrown right at them. The knight unleashed a golden energy, but realized he would only hinder the boy since he couldn't even track that last attack. He lowered his hand, knowing it was pointless. All he could do now was trust the boy's raw talent. As he watched Tran prep his next move, Tran carefully scanned the battlefield for a second. He grunted that his attacks weren't working. The knight yelled that basic physical strikes won't kill a specter. As the beast closed in, Tran shouted back, asking how to kill it. The man yelled that fire would work, so Tran immediately began gathering some heat. Lightning works too, the man added, as Tran unleashed a scorching wave directly at the creature. Tran cursed that it failed again. But the knight explained that wasn't the problem. He secretly wondered if the boy lacked the basic training and core skills needed for magic. Realizing that Tran might not even know the fundamentals, suddenly his eyes went wide as the truth hit him. He remembered Tran was the one who slew the beast and turned it into a specter, meaning the boy had never actually absorbed mana in his life. Suddenly, Tran gets blasted back. The knight barks at him to release the spell instantly, not just hold it. Tran wastes no time and springs right back up, conjuring fresh flames in his palm. Summoning fire is easy, but actually controlling the heat takes serious training. Tran raises his arm as the blazing energy swells. There is no time to hesitate when he can unleash this power right now, so he digs his feet deep into the dirt, bracing for the massive recoil. He hurls the fire at the monster. It grabs the wraith's attention as a green light flares up through the burning vortex. The beast must be completely consumed. By the blaze, the knight yells for Tran to focus and pump more mana into the spell to keep it alive. Their only goal is to reduce this wraith to ash. As the fire explodes, Tran's expression hardens in the middle of the chaos. Funneling all his mana, the fire consuming the wraith swells into a massive storm. The knight looks on with pride, knowing this desperate battle is finally won. Usually it takes a high-ranking noble's power to handle a crisis like this. He is stunned that a completely untrained kid just destroyed the beast. With the threat ended, Tran turns to the knight, asking if it is finally over. The knight warns him that if he wants to avoid another deadly wraith, he must absorb its mana right away. He quickly explains the technique, instructing Tran to tilt his palm and visualize draining the lingering energy. Tran follows his instructions, closing his eyes to quiet his racing mind. Slowly, he senses a strange green current of mana flowing into his body. This is the first time Tran has ever. He absorbs the power, a truly incredible sensation, as the energy surges inside his body. His eyes flash a different color. The power seems to surge through every single vital point at once, feeling this immense strength inside him. Tran finally understands what mana truly is. The knight notes that the feeling can be highly addictive, but then he stares in utter disbelief, realizing this is actually the first time Tran has ever absorbed mana. The knight knows that after awakening, mana usually grows slowly. The absolute fastest way to get stronger is by slaying monsters or rival mages. The seasoned knight is completely blown away. Realizing this kid has absolutely zero experience, it means Tran possesses an insane level of raw natural potential. Calling out to the boy, the knight puts a hand to his chest. He admits he was too harsh and asks which noble house Tran belongs to. He answers that he is from House Korn, then asks the knight to help him clean up this massive mess first. Soon after, the two of them move to a different area. The knight apologizes for being rude and making someone of such high status do manual labor. Tran closes his eyes, explaining he is nobody special, just a simple shepherd who never even knew his father. The knight looks annoyed, telling Tran not to look at him like that, then asks why such a powerful mage is herding sheep, adding that, no offense, it really does not suit him at all. Tran explains it was actually his late mother's wishes. She insisted he live a quiet life until the day she passed away. She knew that if he ever revealed his magic, he would just be exploited and discarded. The knight agrees, admitting the boy's mother was a very wise woman. Tran admits his surprise, expecting the knight to call her paranoid. But the man firmly reiterates that she was absolutely right in her judgment. Lowering his head, the knight explains that mages blessed with immense power are inevitably dragged into bloody conflicts. He points out that 20 years ago, a brutal war erupted between two powerful noble houses. It was a conflict between House Arabian, the family he served, and the Grand House Zahar, costing countless lives. Out of nearly 3,000 Arabian knights, almost a third perished. On that battlefield, Tran silently listens as the knight reveals that everyone close to him was part of that tragic casualty list. The knight remembers his friend Denver, who wanted to open a laundry shop after the war, and his teacher, who always scolded him for being too impatient. Both died, even his own family perished, all of them victims of House Zahar, leaving him completely alone. Hanging his head, the knight repeats that Tran's mother was completely right. Because a warrior's life can vanish far quicker than a simple peasant's. He notes the only flaw in her logic was underestimating Tran's insane talent. Scratching his head, the knight admits it is embarrassing, but Tran easily defeated that dangerous specter, a monster he could not handle on his own. He says Tran's potential far exceeds ordinary soldiers, placing him at least on par with high nobles. Looking closely at Tran, he assures him that his talent is remarkably rare. Tran mentions his mother always claimed his father was a great knight, though he now suspects she was lying. Standing up, the knight urges Tran to leave this mountain and see the world. He explains that to people like them, humans are more than just knights and nobles. He explains that humans still do not rule this world, hinting at a darker truth. Some hidden, greater power must be pulling the strings behind the ruling families. That very force triggered the massive war, wiping out most of their members. The old man apologizes to young Tran, suddenly realizing his own mistake. He forgot the boy still knows almost nothing about the basics of magic. It is only natural for Tran to have endless questions about his lineage. Finding these answers is the absolute least the young man must do now. To uncover them, Tran will have to face the harsh world head-on. No matter what, the elder promises to guide him through this self-discovery. He reminds the boy that a massive world lies out there, just waiting for him to explore it if he can leave this darkness behind. He needs to find a new purpose and start living his life. Having pursued his own goals for 65 years, the elder has plenty of experience. He wants to show the young man just how vast the real world is. He warns that Tran will encounter people far stronger than himself along the way. Even so, he must learn from every single challenge. Tran listens intently. Tran absorbs every lesson. Up until now, he has been completely alone. Nobody has ever openly explained the fundamentals of magic to him. Still, he wonders why a rival family member is being so generous with information. But to the old man, Tran is not some enemy to be feared. He is the savior who healed his wounds. The elder shares more secrets. These special abilities are traits inherited from noble ancestors. The legendary Freyans, some spells look incredibly simple when cast by masters. Tran quickly admits that he is not actually that powerful. He merely possesses a mage's physical build, using mana to boost agility. Tran mentions his sharp sense of smell and his talent for throwing stones. He wonders if these strange habits are clues to his hidden lineage. The elder notes that throwing weapons is a signature trait of House Arabian, although he admits it is also common among other great lineages. Suddenly, Tran notices the old man's expression grow dark. It is as if the elder finally realizes the terrifying truth. Only one specific noble house could be responsible for Tran's unique abilities. Looking visibly annoyed, the man deduces it must be a great house. Specifically, the infamous stalkers or hunters who fought in the Great War. Zahar family, the absolute sworn enemies of the House of Arabian. This realization completely crushes Tran. It is the last thing he wanted. After surviving so much, this is definitely not what he hoped for. Pure shock is written across his face as he looks at his friend. He just discovered he shares a bloodline with his companion's sworn enemies. Tran struggles for words, wanting to apologize for things he never did. Those brutal war crimes were committed by relatives he never even knew. Kior notices his obvious discomfort and gently places a hand on his shoulder. He tells Tran not to worry. The young man feels immense relief. Hearing Kior say he never wanted any part in that war is a huge relief. It was all just the business of the old generation who fought back then. Despite feeling relieved, Tran still asks if the elder has any deep regrets, particularly when it comes to letting him run free to explore the wide world. With a heavy gaze, the old man warns that seeking power down there will inevitably pull Tran right into the path of the Zahar family. He knows the boy possesses incredible potential, but ultimately he trusts him. Recalls the kindness Tan showed during the rescue, even though it risked exposing a secret identity kept hidden for a lifetime. If someone as noble as Tran climbed to the top of the Zahar family, a conflict might be prevented entirely. They say their farewells and move past the topic, knowing deep down their paths will surely cross again, despite encouraging the boy to forge his own path. The elder cannot shake a lingering worry. At the same time, it warms him to see such noble resolve in Tran. Korn recognizes that the young warrior has made his choice with absolute certainty. Tran reassures the older man that he has no intention of leaving until their injuries are completely healed, suggesting they use their remaining days for some training on how to properly control his raw power and mana. Pulling from years of survival, Kior explains that mana is frequently called the Key to absolute power, it is not true omnipotence but performing magic. Requires a monotype that perfectly aligns with the spell itself. Magic difficulty is ultimately decided by three main elements: bloodline, affinity, and casualty. Tran learns that the first component is birthright, which heavily favors highborn nobles who avoid martial paths. Korn points out that it would be incredibly tough for Tran to mend his own body using basic magic, yet those with the southern race to bloodline heal instantly without any formal training. As he listens closely, Tran understands that the second component, affinity, is just how naturally you connect with an element. A skilled mage executes spells far faster if they are deeply accustomed to working with that specific element. The teacher remarks that if Tran had summoned basic fire, he could never match his previous speed or destructive force. Glancing at a nearby wooden mug, Kieran adds that the last concept, casualty, is vital, though even he struggles to master it. He challenges the boy, asking how he would crush the cup. Using pure, unguided mana, Kior channels energy into his palms to show what occurs when casualty is entirely missing from the equation. Without a clear cause, molding mana into a desired outcome becomes nearly impossible. The young warrior nods, slowly grasping the logic of it. Tran references his own unique flames, figuring he must establish a definitive cause for them to naturally burn out. Hearing this brilliant connection, the master beams with pride, realizing the boy has the mind of a true scholar. Yet Tran still wonders if he can manipulate ordinary beasts just as easily. The teacher clarifies that only magical monsters respond to his aura due to his raw mana signature. Having processed the lesson, Tan still finds the logic of sorcery incredibly dense. He then asks if their rivals possess unique traits, and the elder confirms they excel greatly at tracking and assassination. With that, the old master issues. The elder urges the boy to try the ability just once. Tran accepts the challenge since he really does not want anyone spotting him wandering around anyway. He closes his eyes and concentrates, focusing on masking his scent and every sound he makes. After vanishing right in front of the old man, Tran asks if it worked. The elder is completely blown away that the boy pulled it off on his very first try. Once he recovers from the shock, the nomad tells the young man he successfully executed the technique. He looks all around, searching for even a tiny sign of Tran's presence, but in truth, the boy had become completely invisible to the elder's eyes. After a moment, the young man calmly reappears. The old man says it has been ages since he last saw that terrifying, chilling power. He mentions that during the war, the legendary Knights of Araban were absolutely terrified of this technique because it felt so unfair. He explains that Tran does not actually turn invisible, which is why he will teach him some secret magic training methods. Tran is highly confused by this generosity, wondering why he would teach so much to a mage from an enemy family. But the man does not see it that way. He is simply helping the person who saved his life and took care of him. Later, the village elder finds it hard to believe that the young man simply wants to sell his flock and leave. Seeing how stubborn the boy is, the old man asks who will be the shepherd, now complaining that it is incredibly unfair for him to just abandon them without consulting anyone. Tran casually replies that finding a replacement is their own problem to solve. He only expects them to buy the sheep for a fair price. Otherwise, he will set them all free before he goes. He makes it clear that they can try to round up the beasts themselves, warning them it will not be easy. The old man knows Tran is incredibly sharp and always keeps his word. Realizing they have nothing to gain by angering the boy, the villagers decide to pay his asking price. With the money in hand, Tran walks away quietly with his new companion. Tran points out that the villagers still owe his friend compensation and asks if he should go collect it, but his companion shows zero interest in the reward, since Tran was the one who captured the magical beast. Tran shrugs it off, deciding he does not care about their gold either. Finally, the moment arrives for the two of them to go their separate ways. Karen apologizes to the young man for declining the offer to travel together, admitting he feels way more comfortable on his own, even though he had considered traveling as a duo. Tran accepts the decision easily, thinking that a solo journey will be a great experience anyway. Karen simply tells the young man to stay safe and live a life without regrets. Tran replies that he hopes they will meet again in better times. The boy stands there watching Karen's figure fade into the distant horizon for a long time. Only then Does he truly realize why the warrior refused to speak too formally with him? Even though his mother showered him with affection, Tran had secretly always longed for a father figure in his life. He wanted someone to look up to, a true model for the kind of man he hoped to become. The scene shifts to a completely barren, endless desert. Fresh footprints appear in the dirt of the empty wasteland as Tran keeps walking, making his way through the desolate expanse. Tran senses something is off and pauses, scanning his surroundings before looking up at the sky, lost in thought. In the distance, he spots nomadic travelers. They look like traveling merchants, and a wave of relief washes over him. Happy to finally have someone to talk to, he heads over for directions. But one of the men snaps, demanding who he is and why he is blocking them. Tran calmly explains he is just a traveler and asks where the closest town is. They size him up and tell him that if he keeps down this path, he will reach a town called Nur. Tran steps aside, offering his thanks. But before he can walk away, one of the travelers blocks his path. He tells Tran to wait, asking if he really thought directions were free. Tran asks what he means by that, and the man sneers. That when you receive a favor, you must give something in return. Just then the other men draw their swords, demanding that Tran hand over his bag. Tran calmly asks if they are bandits. The leader laughs, calling him incredibly reckless, pointing out they are in a wasteland where no one will ever find his corpse. Raising his weapon, the leader orders him to surrender his bag and leave while they are feeling generous, because murdering him and stripping his corpse is just a chore. Tran looks back and notes that murderers rarely enjoy a very happy ending in these stories. He recalls a crucial conversation with a friend, remembering the exact words on how to control his mana. Those lessons echo in his mind. Tran decides this little gang of outlaws will make perfect target practice. He watches them closely as the bandits point their weapons at him and burst out laughing, mocking him for acting like a real combat. Mage. Tran raises his hand, unleashing his magic to summon a fierce tornado that sweeps them all off their feet. He notes that shaping the wind manually with his hand before boosting its power consumes far less mana. He never imagined he could produce such powerful gales with so little effort. As he processes this, the bruised bandits struggle back up. Tran readies his next spell, drawing water from his canteen and manipulating the floating liquid in midair. He shapes it into points, instantly freezing the water into sharp icicles. One of the bandits sees this and completely panics. The man has no time to flee before getting blasted directly by the spell. Even so, Tran isn't very impressed, thinking that throwing ordinary physical stones would have been far more efficient. The bandit leader falls to his knees, crying that they had no idea he was a mage, begging for his life as the leader grovels and promises to hand over all their gold. Several other bandits try to creep up on Tran from behind, but he hears them and raises his foot, stomping on the ground. He shoots stone spikes from the earth, skewering those trying to ambush him. The leader cannot believe his eyes, shocked that anyone could possess such terrifying power. He is frozen in absolute dread as he stares at his defeated crew on the ground. Tran slowly walks over and announces he has a question for him. He wants to know why they attacked so blindly, given that any random traveler could easily be a mage. The bandit chuckles, explaining it was simply because Tran had bowed his head. Even when they acted like scum, Tran kept bowing, looking like a weak nobody. Tran actually thanks the thug, noting he just learned a valuable lesson. The desperate criminal begs for his life, but his hope instantly shatters. He looks up to see a single, lethal water droplet hovering above his forehead. Right then, Tran recalls Kior's warning, never show mercy to these beasts. Men like this would never hesitate to tear another innocent family apart. Staring at a trinket on the table, Tran finally understands this brutal world. Leaving one monster alive only guarantees that dozens of innocents will suffer. Looking down at the dead leader, Tran refuses to feel any more pity. He has already wasted enough time here and needs to get moving. Following the fresh wagon tracks in the dirt, his mind continues to race. He can't shake the heavy realization he just took a human life. The guilt is heavy, but Kior's grim warning echoes in his mind. Ruthless killers will only find more helpless prey if they are spared. Gradually, the dirt tracks fade, and Tran's pounding chest begins to quiet. Clinging to his master's wisdom, he watches the horizon shift before him. An incredibly massive town reveals itself, completely stealing the young traveler's breath away. Welcome to Mare. Countless citizens pack the streets, rushing in every direction. The sheer scale is overwhelming for someone who grew up in isolation. The towering stone buildings look nothing like the wooden shacks back home. This is a real city, a place of endless noise and action. He wanders over to a fruit stand, but quickly clarifies he is not buying. His only goal is following Kior's advice to find a safe tavern first. The grumpy merchant sneers, aggressively telling the penniless kid to get lost. Tran is taken aback, wondering if city folks are always this hostile. You really have to buy something just to ask a simple question. He points at a strange fruit and asks the price, but gets scoffed at. Seeing the boy's blank stare, the merchant snaps that foreign coins work too. Handing over some change, Tran politely asks for directions to an inn. The vendor points down the street, grunting that the biggest place is ahead. Stepping inside the lively establishment, a waitress quickly welcomes the young traveler. When asked about room rates, she smiles and quotes 16 dupit a night. He happily counts out the coins and immediately asks a crucial question. Are there any high-paying monster bounties active around these parts? Hunting beasts is the absolute best way to harvest mana and earn gold. She stays silent, making him wonder why she's keeping her mouth shut. With a sly grin, she reminds him that valuable secrets require coin. After he pays, she directs him to City Hall, leaving him utterly confused. The girl stares in pure disbelief that someone could be so clueless. She explains that City Hall manages all official business and quest postings. Since darkness has already fallen, it's likely closed until tomorrow morning anyway. Shifting her gaze, she asks if he is actually a licensed hunter. Once again, Tran has absolutely no idea what that term even means. She notes that slaying monsters is how regular folks awaken their magic. What he's chasing, scoffing that anyone who actually believes in those superstitions is a fool, but a man behind them suddenly speaks up, saying it is. No myth, he insists he actually witnessed the whole thing himself. The receptionist perks up, asking Madden if he is still kicking. He grins, saying, he won't die before becoming a true mage. Tran quickly grows annoyed by a hand resting on his shoulder, so Midden quickly retreats with an apology. Curiously, Tran asks the man to share more about it. Midden gladly explains that mages grow stronger by drawing mana from slain beasts, and ordinary folks can do the exact same thing to ascend. Midden points over to his crew, explaining that the four of them hunt together to eventually unlock magic. Tan asks if any of them have actually succeeded yet, but they shake their heads. Only the Lord and his personal mages wield real magic. Maidan wonders how Tran hunts beasts with such basic gear and asks to see his weapon. Tran pulls out his slingshot and Maidan notes that, judging by the heavy wear, Tran has survived plenty of action. Maidan claims that with a tool like that, he could easily hunt beasts like rabbits or foxes. He then offers Tran a role as their group's sharpshooter. Tran politely declines the invitation. Later that night, staring at the ceiling, Tran realizes he has zero reason to join them. He looks back on how insanely chaotic his first day was. It still feels surreal that he left his hometown behind. He wonders what the future holds. Suddenly, a strange sound echoes. He bolts upright, calling out into the darkness. His mind drifts back to his warning from Kior. Does he seriously need to be this paranoid? Even inside a rented room, in his memory, Kior warns him that the city is a dangerous place, insisting he must never let his guard down. Creeping toward the door, Tan begins quietly preparing a spell in his palm. He swings it open to face his intruder. It is Lena, who coyly asks if he was already drifting off. She mentions the night air is chilly, offering to keep him warm. With a sly smile, she starts offering her special services. Tan asks what she means, and she purrs that it is exactly what it looks like. For a few coins, she is willing to do whatever he desires. She laughs off his hesitation, assuming he is simply trying to play hard to get. She purrs that his hidden desires are written all over his face, yet Tran's expression remains completely tranquil, like a meditating Buddha. He recalls Kior's urgent warning about women offering these specific services. He remembers the old man's advice to keep his guard up around tavern maids and escorts. Kior insisted that magic users rarely get sick because of their high disease resistance, but they can still easily pass those sicknesses to others. He strongly cautioned Tran against letting his base desires take control, warning that the city is ruthless. Once the furious woman storms off, Tran lies back down, pondering how He was billed for talking, first by the fruit vendor and now by her. It seems townspeople demand cash for every basic interaction or tiny scrap of news. This city is turning out to be incredibly cold-hearted. Meanwhile, as Tran rests, a hostile gang of thugs makes their way up the stairs. Their leader mutters that the new kid seems far too relaxed. He is useless but talks too much, making him the perfect bait, the leader thinks. He thinks back to his youth, uneasy that Tran hunts with that specific weapon. Still, he figures if the kid has even 1% of his former strength, he will survive. After all, Tran is none other than the monster hunter Midam. Safe in his room, Tran decides that maybe city folks are not so heartless. If that is true, he cannot wait to see what lies ahead. Soon, a new day begins. The moment Tran arrives at the spot, he is greeted. He wonders if the man standing there is some kind of local official. Tran announces he is there to hunt. When the official treats him coldly, Tran recalls his old master warning him the world would not always be kind. The elder had explained that nobody is nice for free, but he shared a simple way to earn quick respect. All you had to do was reveal that you were a mage and ordinary folk would treat you like a god. Remembering this, Tran studies the paper, planning to just scan it and return it. Since he cannot keep the poster, Tran studies the sketch of the beast. Carefully, it depicts some kind of crow monster, without paying much attention. To him, the official scoffs that he likely won't manage to kill the creature, but if he succeeds, he must bring back proof. He explains that if a mage fails to disperse the carcass with mana, it will become a wraith. He warns him that abandoning a monster's dead body is a severe crime punishable by execution. Tran is already well aware of this, knowing exactly what happens when they transform into wraiths. After studying the beast, Tran hands back the poster and asks if knights hunt them. 2. Realizing the man is incredibly rude and refuses to answer him, Tran decides to simply walk away. Soon, the man realizes the boy has stopped talking and left. Watching the young hunter walk away, the man assumes he'll get killed, never expecting to see him return. But against all odds, the dead monster is dumped right on the floor. As proof of his success, everyone stares at the carcass in shock. Completely unable to believe their eyes, they struggle to comprehend how Tran managed to hunt such a beast. The official begins firing off rapid questions, turning it into an interrogation. Once Tran confirms he hunted the beast alone, he calmly asks for his reward. The silver is quickly handed over to Tran to pay for the job. Even then, the men keep examining the dead beast, amazed that its wings are flawless. They have never seen a blade-winged crow in such pristine condition. Tran merely stands there, waiting. Since this task is finished, he wants to know if there are other beasts to hunt. Tran continues to utterly stun the local townspeople. Even after hearing his request, the men still cannot believe that he genuinely wants to keep hunting. After earning a tidy sum, Tran heads back to his inn and orders a massive feast. Staring at the pile of empty plates, the blonde girl admits she never expected him to be so powerful. She is amazed he hunted 30 monsters in only 3 days, earning a fortune while Tran focuses on devouring his food. Tran then calmly explains that the money is not his. Let's look at his main goal. He explains his real plan is absorbing the mana, and with it, he can feel his power level shooting up. As she keeps talking, Tran looks back at all the raw energy he's stolen so far. He realizes his mana reserves have skyrocketed since his days traveling with corn. But there is a hard limit to how much he can grow by farming weak beasts. He is bound to hit a wall, so Tran changes the subject and asks if she swiped his food. The girl immediately denies it, claiming he polished off the entire plate, teasing him for eating so much despite being skinny. Even the chef is thrilled to watch a customer appreciate his cooking like that. Tran just shrugs and says the food was simply too good to resist. Suddenly, a heavy hand grips Tran's shoulder. A group of young punks is standing there, demanding to know why he is hogging all the best dishes. They mock the scrawny hunter for eating so much, especially after making a fortune on monsters. One thug demands that Tran share the wealth, but gets smacked right back. Tran is not in the mood for games, and he absolutely despises random strangers getting up in his personal space. He cold-bloodedly tells them that if they were looking for a charity handout, he just delivered a generous one. The instigator's friends scream that he shouldn't act so smug over one lucky punch. They lunge forward as a group, determined to teach the kid a lesson. One thug reaches for a wooden chair to gain an edge in the brawl. Tran snatches the weapon midair and readies a single finger to flick the attacker. He chooses a gentle tap, knowing it will still launch the guy backward. It is a tiny flick, but the force is massive enough to crash the man onto the floor. Angry at the commotion, the blonde girl shrieks that she absolutely will not allow brawling in her tavern, since she is the one stuck footing the bill for broken chairs. Seething with rage, she warns them she will not repeat herself, terrified by her explosive temper. The troublemakers immediately back down. Sometime later, the group heads to Tran's room to apologize face to face. They swear it will never happen again, admitting they only acted out of pure envy since they have not earned a single coin in months. The entire group bows low, begging for mercy. They explain that times have been incredibly tough for them recently. They have not even been able to pay for their rooms at the inn for 3 days. Softening slightly at their tragic story, Tran hands over some cash to clear their outstanding debt. He says he is doing this because they attempted to invite him to join their adventuring party in the past, but he knows nothing in this world is free. Tran makes it very clear that in exchange for the coin, he wants solid local information. The party leader eagerly agrees to the terms and starts spilling everything he knows about the territory. With the crucial intel secured, Tran maps out his next move, realizing this upcoming hunt will be his last in this town. With fresh details about the neighboring city, he decides it is time to pack up. Tran appreciates that Midam shared such useful details, making him a great contact. Sure, he lacks the deep, veteran experience of Korn, but that lack of edge actually makes him much easier to deal with. Mid-thought, Tran's eyes suddenly snap wide open as a dangerous presence registers nearby. His heightened sense of smell catches a unique scent. Now you and I can see exactly which way he needs to go. Tran. He rushes toward the scent, praying he is wrong, but the deep claw marks on a tree are impossible to ignore. Arriving too late, he witnesses the grim aftermath from a distance. Tan spots a young man slumped against a trunk, recognizing him as one of Midam's party members. The damage was done. Scanning the area, he realizes it wasn't just this boy who met a brutal end. Tran sees that Midam, their leader, suffered a horrific fate as well. Though he doesn't know the details, he figures it was the work of some high-level monster. He kneels down to examine his friend's body more closely. Seeing the man covered in deep gashes, Tran asks what on earth happened here. He looks over as the dying survivor struggles to speak. In a faint, barely audible whisper, the kid gasps that it was a rabbit. Tran spots the beast gnawing on something, doubting if that nightmare could actually be a rabbit. The scene shifts to reveal the beast in full, as it happily munches away. The rabbit hears the hunters calling it a monster. To Tran, the creature is a pure abomination, and the beast is already eyeing its next target. Tan turns to size up the beast. Right then, the rabbit suddenly lunges with hyper-aggressive rage. Things get incredibly tense in a split second. The rabbit lands, and Tran realizes the strike barely missed him. Tran readies a counterattack to show this monster what he can do. Locking in, he raises his other arm and swings his weapon with absolute force. He unleashes the blow on the rabbit, ready to crush this massive opponent. But the giant rabbit does not back down, readying a fierce strike of its own. Tran's attacks get closer and closer to his target, but the agile creature manages to block every single blow. Tran realizes this rabbit is already used to defending against ranged attacks. Enraged, the beast leaps straight at Tran. The rabbit glares at him with pure malice, its crimson eyes wide open. The monster wants to overwhelm him quickly, but it quickly realizes Tran is both powerful and fast. The beast lands completely baffled by how easily its prey escaped. Gearing up, Tran leaps high into the air, ready to strike, even against a giant monster rabbit. Tran refuses to give it any room to counterattack. After landing his blow, he quickly leaps back to reassess the situation, but that strike only makes the rabbit crave his flesh even more. Despite the pain, the beast lunges at Tran, but he suddenly vanishes. The creature bites right through a tree to clear its path and keep up the chase, losing sight of its target. The beast goes wild with rage. The relentless violence of its attacks kicks up a massive cloud of dust as the adrenaline wears off. The deep wounds catch up to the rabbit and it screeches. Tran's attack had cut much deeper than the monster realized. Shortly after, the battle ends with the defeated beast collapsing to the ground. Looking down at the carcass, Tan wonders how much raw mana he can harvest, since The spoils belong to the victor. Tran reaches out his hands to absorb all of the creature's energy. As the mana flows into his body, his power surges. He realizes the sheer amount of energy here is on a different level. Watching the process, captivated, unable to believe what is happening. Just then, a young man approaches and asks Tran if he is a mage, wanting to know why he hid his identity all this time. He even asks if Tran has family to send his possessions to, just like the other injured victims are doing. Among the crowd, someone stares closely at Tran, finding his face strangely familiar. A few hours earlier, this same youth had mentioned that the nearby major city of Orem housed a massive library. They had discussed the giant collection of books stored inside, which was the core reason the city was so famous. Tran grew interested the exact moment he heard about the sheer size of that archive, but the youth explained that entry was strictly restricted and only mages could enter. That left Tran deep in thought, since that rule could easily derail his entire plan. Back in the present, Tran announces he is setting off for the grand city the youth mentioned. With a heavy heart, the young survivor calls out the name of a fallen friend. Walking away, he quietly hopes his lost companion finds peace in the next life. Sometime later, elsewhere, Tran is waiting in a massive line. You and I can see he feels embarrassed that he was so amazed by the tiny village of Murray before. Standing right before him now is the towering city of Orem. He never expected so many people lining up to get inside. Tran notices how strict the guards are and wonders if they are hunting down criminals. He realizes a city this big absolutely needs a tight security system. While he is lost in thought, a voice suddenly barks at him to stop. A guard points a finger, declaring he is not allowed inside, leaving Tran completely baffled. The sentry explains that Tran's clothes are covered in dirt, demanding he clean up before trying to enter. Tran ignores the guards nagging entirely because his attention is captured by a massive tower dominating the skyline. Up close, the grand structure displays the immense wealth and power of the city. Tran realizes that must be the famous library of Midon. We can see its scale is jaw-dropping, leaving him to believe it could only have been built using magic. As Tran walks up to the entrance, a guard demands to know his business. When Tran replies that he wishes to enter, the guard repeats that only mages are allowed. Tran nods in understanding and claims to be a mage, leaving the guard completely speechless. The man scoffingly tells Tran to stop playing games with him, raising a hand and sneering. There is no way someone like Tran could be a mage. As he holds his hand up, a crimson energy begins radiating from his palm. Tran recalls hearing that mages can naturally sense each other's mana to instantly gauge their strength. Still, Tran does not look very pleased with this sudden interrogation. The guard grins wildly as he tries to read Tran's power level. Though slightly annoyed, Tran waits patiently, knowing it is just the guard's job. But as we watch him check Tran's energy, the sudden pressure is so intense that the guard collapses, leaving his partner utterly terrified. Shivering on the pavement, the guard realizes Tran is no common magic user. This man must be a high-ranking noble. Shocked by this, the other guard quickly introduces himself as a low-level member of House Kenya. The guard asks Tran which family he belongs to. Tran asks if a last name is truly required, but the terrified sentry quickly backtracks, stammering that it is not necessary. He explains that entering the library requires permission from the master. He must consult House Voltas first. Tran can only sigh deeply. Tran sighs deeply, knowing this process will drag on. Even a simple task could take a whole decade to sort out. To make matters worse, a new issue arrives. He now has to deal with a maid. His day is just spiraling downhill. A maid is trailing right behind him. Actually, it is a whole crowd of them. He is surrounded by servants, and he has absolutely no clue what to do with them. He tries his best to tolerate their presence, but finally loses patience and asks them to leave. However, they explain they will face severe punishment if they do not serve him. Left with no other choice, Tran gives up and tells them to do as they please. His reluctant compliance seems to pay off, and one of the maids stares in awe. She covers her mouth with a gasp, pointing out how much he has changed. Noticing her intense gaze, Tran asks if he has something on his face. Flustered, she apologizes, admitting she was simply captivated by his handsome features. Dismissing it as exaggeration, Tran tells them to cut the small talk. He adds that they can stop apologizing. Suddenly, he glances to the side. He wonders what is happening now as a young girl suddenly appears. She is flanked by her personal bodyguard and immediately notices Tran's new look. She remembers him looking like a complete beggar just a short while ago. She remarks that a quick bath and clean clothes have transformed him into a prince. He introduces himself simply as Tran, and she reveals her name is Azella. Usually nobles would state their family houses, but Tran keeps his a secret. He prefers to guard his background. Azella taps her chin thoughtfully. She calls it a real shame, smiling as she plans to have some fun. Without warning, a bright, golden energy begins to radiate from her body. It seems like everyone in this place wants to test Tran's mana capacity. They want to see how much pressure he can take. Tran looks thoroughly annoyed. He hates dealing with the exact same trial again. He unleashes his own power. A fierce blue energy flows from Tran as he stares down the young girl. Their blue and golden lights clash violently. Her personal guard steps in immediately. He shields the terrified maids from the immense pressure of their colliding forces. Tran sighs yet again, utterly exhausted by all this unnecessary dramatic tension. Azella flashes a highly satisfied smile and bursts into unexpected laughter. Amused by the situation, the red-haired girl steps closer and calls his name. She walks up to him and bluntly asks for his hand in marriage, leaving him blank. He is totally speechless, wondering if she could possibly be serious. Teasing him for his shock, she asks why he looks so stunned. She turns to leave, noting she simply thought he would be surprised. She mentions the position next to her is open, urging him to consider it. Tran silently watches her leave, the strange encounter leaving him deep in thought. Looking down, he struggles to make sense of the wild events. Then Tran notices his hand is shaking. Her magical power was immense. It was easily on his level. He wonders if a mere human is capable of that. The scene cuts to an office, where Tran stands before a seated gentleman. The host welcomes him, asking if he knows his identity, and Tran introduces himself. He asks if Tran is there for the library, noting that many visit just. Seeking strange secrets, Tran clarifies that he has no interest in things like that. The host then warns him that no hidden family secrets lie within those walls. Since it is getting late, he advises Tran to go get some rest first. So they can handle everything tomorrow, and Tran politely thanks him for his hospitality. The next morning, 2 guards bow respectfully in front of the library entrance, welcoming him inside now that his access is officially approved. Soon, the massive doors swing open and Tran is stunned by the towering staircases and endless shelves of ancient books. He stands there completely speechless until a voice suddenly speaks up. To welcome the new leader, a young girl steps forward, introducing herself as the head librarian, ready to explain the basic rules on her family's orders. While she outlines the guidelines, Tran silently thinks it is pretty bizarre that a child is running the place. Her first rule is simple: any damage must be paid for, and the second is that books never leave. She warns him she is watching his every move. Tran agrees, but asks if she could kindly step back a bit while he reads, finding the close supervision a little awkward. He then asks if she has read every single book here, and she proudly confirms it, stating her job is to find whatever he needs, whether it is an exciting story or perhaps something a bit more adult, teasing him about his young age. Tran simply responds that he is looking for a basic guide to understand this mysterious world. Hearing this, she slams a heavy stack of volumes onto the table. She explains that most are hundreds of years old and lack modern details, but points out one specific guide that should give him the answers. Tran picks it up, instantly intrigued, and realizes it is exactly what he has been looking for. He begins carefully flipping through the pages to read. Taking a deep breath, he concentrates on the text, quickly realizing how incredible the material is. Soon, he falls into a steady routine, reading all day. Gradually, he develops a solid grasp of the geography of this vast world. He is fascinated to learn about proper mage etiquette and how enchanted artifacts are processed along with dangerous monsters and relics from a lost ancient empire. As he absorbs this information, everything that once seemed confusing becomes crystal clear. Later, back in the study, the noble asks if he is enjoying his access to the library, pointing out that letting him read there is a massive favor that must be repaid, regardless of how generously he has treated him so far. He explains that a terrifying beast recently appeared just north of Orel, and the 4 brave knights sent to eliminate it have completely vanished. He needs a mage to intervene, but only has 2. adding Tran to the group would make 3, rendering the mission much safer. Tran answers that he fully understands, keeping in mind that protecting innocent lives is a mage's duty. Regardless, still, the situation feels unusual, as mages rarely get involved. Matters like this, the noble explains that the blocked path is their sole trade route and it has been completely shut down for 10 days. Tran decides he will quickly handle the beast and then return to his studies. His reading a few hours later, they set off. Several knights are seen walking beside Tran and the young red-haired girl, throwing her hands up. The girl complains that her father is absolutely unbelievable. She claims she can't believe he dragged a guest into a beast hunt, questioning if their own knights are really that unreliable. She waves it off, saying it's fine since they're guests anyway and her dad is just being dramatic. The young man beside her speaks up, saying the lord of the house isn't being dramatic at all and that she's exaggerating. The girl glares, giving him a look that clearly says, "Shut up." The young man turns to Tran, asking if this is his first time on a mission like this, introducing himself as Marvin Baltes. The girl kicks a rock, lost in thought. As she kicks it, she grumbles that she wants this over with so she can go home and rest. Marvin asks Tran if he is interested in his sister, but Tran says no. Closing his eyes, the guy says, "That's very good to hear." Suddenly, the group stops when they hear an order to halt. Up ahead, wreckage of a carriage is scattered across the ground. 2 knights inspect the wreckage and one points out that the pieces are scattered along the north road, meaning the carriage was likely ambushed on its way down. Stroking his chin, Tran finds the entire setup incredibly strange. There's even a distinct handprint left on the wreckage. A knight spots the mark and points it out to the others. The girl does not understand, so Tran points directly to the handprint. He explains it looks like the attackers ambushed the merchants and fled into the woods, so they should track their trail. The girl, who can barely use her innate magic, says she forgot how to do that anyway and asks Marvin if the plan is bad. Tran tells them he's going to check out the tracks. The girl asks if he was a scout, but Tran simply says he's used to tracking things. With that, he sniffs a piece of cloth from the carriage. His eyes widen as he senses something highly unusual. He can actually see the scent trail drifting through the air. Tran points ahead, letting them know the trail goes this way. They reach a river, and Tran mentions the trail ends there because it looks like their target took a bath. The young lady asks if a beast would actually wash itself to cover its tracks. Tran replies that it probably just wanted to clean off. Suddenly, his eyes widen as the scent gets much stronger. Tran whips around and warns everyone that the monster is right behind them. Right on cue, a massive beast appears right in front of them. The massive creature instantly grabs everyone's attention. The knights spin around, staring up at the massive threat. As they watch, the monster grabs a pile of rocks to hurl at them. One of the knights screams for everyone to watch out. The monster hurls the rocks, and several knights are blasted by the impact. Tran reacts instantly, leaping backward to dodge the attack. He looks around to see how the others are faring. Not everyone managed to escape unscathed. The redhead actually uses one of her own knights as a shield to protect herself. After using her ally, she simply tosses him to the ground. Tran thinks to himself that his mother's warnings about people were absolutely correct. The young lady orders the remaining knights to charge, and the warriors instantly obey. They rush straight toward the monster. She urges them forward, but a knight warns her that the creature moves way too fast. Meanwhile, Tran quietly lines up his shot. Their leader screams at the squad to move faster as the beast closes in. Suddenly, a blazing projectile whizzes right past the lady's face, forcing her to halt. She stops dead in her tracks, realizing an attack just came from behind. Every knight freezes as a brilliant beam of blue light cuts through the air. It shoots right between them, packed with enough force to shatter the solid rock. The beam strikes the monster dead on. The shocked knights look back in disbelief. The lady and her men turn, desperate to see who pulled off that incredible shot. And there stands Tran, holding his weapon. He looks up, clearly annoyed by the situation. They instantly realize Tran's single strike completely incapacitated the target. Leaving the beast no time to recover, Azella readies her final, devastating blow. Intense, blazing flames begin to swirl and gather around her arm. She unleashes a massive serpent of pure fire straight at the downed creature. The impact triggers a massive explosion, drawing everyone's attention. Tran is stunned to witness the destructive power of the Baltes family bloodline. The knights sigh in deep relief, glad the brutal battle is finally over. Izella admits she got chills when that first shot buzzed right past her. Marvin teases her, asking if she was actually terrified of Tran's attack. As they banter, the surviving knights quickly tend to their wounded comrades. Tran watches them help each other up, thinking about how messy the situation became. It was pure chaos, but he is incredibly relieved that everyone survived. Even with a surprise ambush, they could have easily avoided such severe wounds. Tran knows these warriors' bodies naturally grow much stronger when using magic. Since they are tougher than normal humans, they should have fought smarter. Instead of using the weak as shields, they should have adapted. Meanwhile, Marvin notices the intense gaze and asks Tran why he is staring so hard. Tran quickly brushes it off. Izella barks at them to focus on business. She calls Tran over to begin absorbing the slain monster's mana. The three of them gather around the beast. Tran wastes no time. He starts draining the energy, remembering a key detail from his books. Even when multiple people absorb mana together, the power shared does not decrease. Meanwhile, Izella and Marvin suddenly stop their own absorption. They complain that they have already hit their maximum growth limit. Izella watches Tran, finally understanding why he joined their party. His raw talent easily matches her own. It actually feels a bit intimidating. Knowing that this noble has not even reached his limit yet, soon. The three finish harvesting the energy. They all head back to House Voltus. During the journey, Marvin praises Tran, admitting they needed him to find the beast. Tran brushes it off, secretly wishing he had figured out the creature sooner. Specifically, he refers to the beast's highly unique detection skills. This leaves Marvin completely baffled. Tran explains how these special skills awaken and vary based entirely on the creature's physical traits. Since that giant ape had massive eyes, it could easily spot them from afar. Weigh and throw things. Marvin asks how he figured it out so fast, and Tran replies that he read about it in a library bestiary. The two of them note that the library is outdated and they have only been there once because the books were way too complicated. Tran suggests that next time they can just ask the librarian to suggest some easier reads. Izella looks confused and asks who this librarian is. She points out that as far as she knows, absolutely nobody works in that library. After returning from their mission, Tran heads straight to the library entrance. The moment he steps inside, the librarian greets him with a cheerful welcome. Tran quietly realizes that he was being careless, since no ordinary citizen would call a noble by his name so casually. Plus, it is strange that anyone would work as a librarian in such a deserted, empty place. Cutting straight to the point, he asks her how she knows his name. The girl is caught off guard by the sudden question. She quickly recovers, teasingly asking if he is only realizing this now. Tran admits he is, and she explains that she learned his name from his license. She adds that absolutely nothing in this library escapes her sight. Tran then asks what he should call her from now on. The girl says she doesn't have a name and tells him he can call her whatever he likes. She playfully suggests calling her sweetheart, but Tran shuts her down instantly and decides to just call her librarian. She finds his sudden politeness amusing, pointing out that he spent the last few days ordering her around to do chores for him. Tran denies acting that way and asks her to step back because having her so close makes him uncomfortable. Floating effortlessly in the air, she explains that she is not human but rather a unique kind of spirit. She explains that when a soul inhabits a living body, it becomes a living spirit. When it enters something dead, it becomes a dead spirit. But if it inhabits something that is neither alive nor dead, it simply becomes a spirit. She reveals that she is actually the library itself, taking on this physical form based on Tran's personal preferences to make chatting easier. Right before teasing him about his taste, Tran accuses her of lying, but she assures him she only speaks the truth, acting like a reflection in clear water. Still skeptical, Tran decides to inspect the librarian closely. He reaches out to touch her, but his hand passes right through as if she is completely intangible. Annoyed, she tells him to cut it out, complaining that he is being super creepy. The librarian then mentions how incredibly frustrating it is that she cannot use physical force against intruders. If she had her way, she would severely punish anyone who does not treat books with proper care. Tran asks why none of the other visitors seem to know she exists. She explains that until now, no one had met the requirements to actually perceive her Creator designed her so only people of a certain caliber could see her, and Tran is the only one who fits the bill. Tran asks what she means by caliber, wondering if it has to do with those prestigious bloodlines mages always mention. When he asks what his own bloodline might be, she tells him to ask his parents, forcing Tran to admit he is an orphan. Licking her lips, she offers to find out for him, explaining she just needs to examine his body. Tran gets flustered and confused by the offer. She asks him to confirm if that really is his actual physical body. Chuckling at the ridiculous situation, he tells her that yes, it absolutely is. Out of nowhere, the librarian suddenly thrusts her hand straight into Tran's chest, terrifying him. She calmly explains to him that they are now linked. Surprisingly, Tran feels absolutely no pain at all. She reveals that his main bloodline belongs to a stalker and hunter, tracing it back to the Zahar family. But a second later, she is stunned to detect a second bloodline within him. This hidden power is intertwined, proving he is the offspring of two entirely different lineages. Intrigued, Tran asks her what this second lineage could be, but she confesses she has no idea since that power remains sealed. She reassures him that a sealed bloodline is normal when inheriting too, promising that the seal will shatter naturally once he grows stronger. At this, Tran looks down. Deep in thought, remembering his mother, he realizes she must have been a descendant of a noble house. Even with diluted blood, she was too highly educated to ever be a simple commoner. Tran thanks her, and in return, she requests that he stay with her for one more month. Knowing the spirit's true identity, Tran begins studying under her, begging her to explain various complex subjects. She proves to be shockingly wise, even reciting texts from books that were stolen and lost millions of years ago. Learning nature's laws straight from her feels like unlocking an absolute goldmine. He learns that sickness stems from microscopic germs, and that decay happens because of them as well. Tran also studies the refraction of light, friction generated warmth, and cellular healing. Armed with this revolutionary knowledge, he decides to conduct a physical test, focusing first on decay. The moment he touches an apple, it rapidly rots away. The results are incredible, though he could achieve this using basic magic before. This scientific approach consumes far less mana. Simply by shifting his perspective on reality, Tran's spellcraft receives a massive boost. He realizes the elite probably hoard this science to prevent others from challenging their monopoly on power. The librarian nods, noting this explains why human civilization has actually regressed so dramatically over the centuries. Soon the day comes for Tran to depart. He mentions that the library keeper is growing quite tired of having him around. Desperate to stop him, the spirit begs Tran to bring her along. He quickly sidesteps her as she clings to him, questioning if she can even leave the library grounds. Since she is bound here, she pleads for him to stay instead, promising to spoil him rotten. But when he declines, she floats away, suddenly pretending she does not care at all. She mentions that endless divine legacies remain scattered across the lands, suggesting he seek them out for some wiser mentor spirit. As she drifts off, she claims she might drop by to visit him. Pouting, she mutters that if he is going to be stubborn, then whatever, but Tran only grins, reminding her he has endless scrolls to study. Later, stepping out, Tran recalls the map he studied in the archives. According to those charts, the Zahar estate lies east of Orem, and in that moment his mind is made up. He will head to Zahar for answers. His parents, Tran doesn't feel any rush now, choosing to take his sweet time. As he heads into the forest, stopping to rest, cook some food, and recharge his energy, he figures that if the clues were going to vanish, they would have disappeared during the 18 years he wasn't looking for them. Besides, if there is still anything left to find, it won't vanish just because he's a bit late. But suddenly, something catches Tan's attention up ahead. It sounds like a horse neighing. Peering from a bush, he watches as a wild beast charges forward. It looks like it threw its rider, though it still wears a saddle. A group of thugs seems to be trying to attack the poor creature. Even from a distance, their sheer rage is obvious toward the beast. Then Tran spots something else that really grabs his focus. Those are dark elves, wicked beings using mind manipulation magic. They aren't holding back either, as they all seem deep in some kind of ritual. Judging by the immense mana they are channeling, it is undoubtedly a form of dark elf necromancy. Tran recalls reading about this in a book, knowing their dark magic is extremely dangerous. Observing the scene, he hesitates, questioning if he should even get involved. He figures that maybe the guy on the ground brought this on himself by messing with these dark elves, but Tran's eyes widen when he sees how these creatures actually feed. He watches one of them tear a chunk out of a human arm. Another elf eagerly asks whose flesh it is, wanting a taste to see if it's any good. Realizing they are cannibals, Tran's blood boils. He has absolutely no choice but to step in and stop this madness. After using his stealth skill to watch the monsters finish feeding, he decides to make his move. Tran's strike is so devastating that the feasting elves, completely distracted, never even see it coming. The elf who wanted a bite of that arm is left completely bewildered as to why his companion just suddenly vanished in an instant. His appetite disappears because all that's left of his partner is a massive puddle of blood on the ground. Terrified, the elf thinks it serves his comrade right for refusing to share the arm. Right now, his only goal is buying time to escape, but Tran isn't about to give him that chance, immediately unleashing a barrage of razor-sharp stone shards at him. In the middle of the chaos, even their horned beast gets caught in the crossfire. The elf cannot comprehend why his own beasts are abandoning him instead of staying to protect him. All the demonic beasts seem completely out of control. This rain of rocks is so intense that there is absolutely no way to dodge, no matter how they try to move. The enemies just keep getting pelted. The evil elf figures this must be some kind of stealth magic. He wants to see if the intruder stays hidden after taking a little damage, so the elf decides to use his most powerful and wicked spell just to force the enemy out into the open. The problem is Tran is actually enjoying being camouflaged in the shadows, but the horned, meat-eating elf isn't about to make things that easy for him. It doesn't take long for Tran to have to show his face because the elf's spell is just too strong. Now that he's pinpointed the intruder, the elf sends his beast after him, but Tran has no patience for games, charging up massive energy in his hands to unleash his searing flames. The hotter the fire, the cleaner the kill. The first to get absolutely crushed is the beast charging straight at Tran. This massive display of raw power blows the surrounding enemies away. Even so, Tin realizes these beasts are insanely fast. Luckily, he already took one down earlier, making the fight feel a little more manageable. But right as he thinks that, Tin feels the sharp teeth of a beast lunging to eat him alive. Getting bitten on the leg by this wild monster immediately ruins Turin's day. Furious, he kicks the creature off him with sheer force, but the second he spins around, he is staring down a raging buffalo. This monster is brutal, slamming Turin hard against a nearby tree, taking the heavy horn blow to his chest. Turin collapses to the ground and begins coughing. He is in bad shape and heavily outnumbered out here. Surviving dark elf gloats, glad to see the human who killed his comrade suffer, but his joy ends when a horse kicks him square in the face. The horse keeps stomping relentlessly, making sure its heavy hooves crush him completely, as the elf screams for his beasts to help. The wild buffalo and the fox merely stand by and watch, right after the rest of the pack joins in, biting the horse. As the elf finally breaks free from the horse, he swears that they will pay dearly for this humiliation. Suddenly, something flashes right by, so quickly that the elf never sees it coming. He is struck with absolute precision. There is zero chance of survival once he runs directly into Turin deep in these woods. Meanwhile, the horse fights back, kicking away every wild beast trying to bite it. Turin is relieved it can defend itself, though the exhausted stallion is on the verge of collapsing. Turin tries his hardest to ignore the agonizing pain from his own severe wounds. His body hurts so badly that he genuinely wonders if he will survive. Luckily, it seems the majestic beast wants to reward the young warrior who saved its life. The horse nudges and tries hard to grab Tin's attention. Turin quickly realizes the creature is grateful for protecting both itself and its master. Much later, the unconscious rider slowly begins to stir and wake up. He looks around in total confusion, completely unable to recognize this unfamiliar place. The sight of a campfire triggers instant panic in him, which makes sense given his terrifying ordeal with local cannibals, but he relaxes quickly once he spots Tran sitting peacefully across from him. Seeing that the stranger is awake, Tran gently asks how he is feeling. Still disoriented, the man asks for his savior's name. Tran briefly explains how he witnessed the dark elf ambush and decided to intervene. Beside them, the horse nods its head, almost as if to back up every single word. Tran is thoroughly impressed by how smart this creature is. It clearly understands human speech and remains fiercely loyal to its owner. The blonde noble sincerely thanks Tan for saving his life and introduces his highborn house. Curious about their enemies, Tran wants to gather intelligence, so he asks if there are more dark elves nearby. The noble explains that his traveling party was suddenly ambushed without warning, leaving them entirely defenseless against their cruel attackers. He goes on to mention he admitted he had heard rumors of rare, savage tribes before, but he never imagined they would be this deadly. Gazing at his horse, his eyes well up, remembering how the poor beast was nearly eaten alive. He quickly apologizes, explaining that the companions he lost in the ambush meant everything to him. Tran gently asks if the victims were his own family. As they speak, Tran realizes this man is truly a decent person. Tran reassures him that he defeated both dark elves himself, making it unlikely any others remain in the woods. Still, Tran wants to be entirely certain, so he activates his scouting skill. This ability lets him see over vast distances. After carefully scanning the surrounding area, he confirms that no other dark elves are lurking nearby. The nobleman then asks Tran if he has any immediate plans. Hearing that the young warrior is simply wandering, the blonde knight asks if he belongs to some prestigious noble house. Tran tries to brush it off, insisting he is not actually as powerful as he seems. He claims he caught the first elf off guard and struggled immensely while fighting the second. Tran emphasizes that he only survived that brutal clash thanks to his crimson steed. The two men continue talking naturally as peers, yet Tran secretly notes he would have been far weaker without absorbing the mana from those slain dark elves. Meanwhile, the knight observes Tran, questioning if his actual level is enough to tackle two necromancers alone. He reasons the youth must possess an extraordinary combat style or carry a very legendary bloodline. He also cannot comprehend why such a talented warrior would travel entirely alone, so he proposes that if Tran has no set destination in mind, he should join his household. Eyeing Tran, the noble resolves to craft him a custom magical artifact as a token of gratitude. They agree their next duty is to bury the fallen soldiers who died battling the dark mages. Once the task is finished, the blonde noble looks deeply sorrowful and wishes he could return their remains to their loved ones. He then faces Tran, offering his deepest gratitude once again for the timely rescue. The noble remarks that watching a leader of his rank weep for his subordinates probably looks pathetic, but he believes those who fall in honorable combat ascend to a grand palace to dwell with the gods. He insists that if strength means ignoring the loss of his comrades, he would rather remain weak. Tran answers that he does not view that grief as a flaw but as genuine compassion. The knight suggests that since they have agreed to journey together, they should speak more informally. Full of enthusiasm, he declares his excitement to cooperate with Tran from now on. For a former mountain shepherd used to receiving cold treatment from villagers, having someone extend a hand of friendship so quickly was incredibly shocking. Regardless, making a true friend is always a positive thing. After all of that exhausting ordeal, the noble suggests a brief rest. Tran is curious about the mysterious chest the man is carrying. To ease his curiosity, the knight reveals it is a cooling container. Opening it to display plenty of fresh food, he explains he purchased these high-quality provisions in the last settlement he visited. The noble proudly boasts about his magical items, showing how a simple button press on one pours fresh water, while another transforms into a sturdy shelter with a bit of wood. Next, he reveals a third artifact that blasts an alarm the moment anyone sneaks close. Even his clothes are magical self-cleaning gear. To say Tran is amazed is an understatement. He had no clue enchanted items could be wasted on such mundane, everyday chores. Eyeballing his friend's gear, Tran remarks that getting those clothes is more than enough payment. After all, he saved his life, but the man laughs, calling that a cheap reward. He promises to hand over something far superior once they finally reach his estate. Even if the clan elders object, he vows to make sure Tran gets his reward. The companion then asks if Tran is seriously new to traveling the world. He admits he lost track of the insane variety of magic Tran cast on their journey. Beast taming, freezing, levitation, liquid control, and physical buffs, light magic, terrain restriction, and even summoning lightning. To Tran, wielding all those powers was as natural as breathing. Slightly embarrassed, Tran reminds his friend of their deal not to pry His companion laughs it off as a joke, then asks his actual age. He nearly chokes when Tran reveals he is just a month shy of 19. The proud, bragging traveler immediately claims that such a feat is impossible, especially since he is 43, though he shrugs off the massive age gap. It does not matter, still, he admits he really should have noticed sooner. Since Tran easily obliterated 2 high-tier necromancers with his insane magical power. He concludes there are only 2 absolute monster geniuses in the entire world. While the other prodigy is not quite on Tran's tier, they are close. He reveals that this prodigy is his cousin, instantly sparking Tran's curiosity. Tran asks if she can craft an artifact for him, but his companion hesitates. That might not be possible, as she is from the core main line. She is actually the Princess of Arabian, destined to lead their entire clan. As they walk, he explains the cutthroat rules of the great magic families. Unlike minor noble houses, the grand patriarch of their clan must be overwhelmingly powerful. Thus, passing down the throne to one's own child is never easy. When you have dozens of ultra-talented relatives competing in the same generation, a rival stronger than the heir always seems to rise up. Yet the patriarch's own daughter, Mesa, was born with peerless, godly talent. Just 10 short years after awakening her deep pool of magic power, she completely mastered their secret clan sorcery and all martial combat arts. Turin wonders if having this much raw power is actually normal for her age. The blonde companion nods, explaining she received a major specialized form of backing. She even inherited their late great uncle's magic power when he passed away. Even though everyone in the family received a tiny portion, Tran realizes that this legacy system is exactly why the powerhouse clans stay on top. He continues listening as his friend points ahead, declaring they have arrived. Tran gazes out at the landscape, completely mesmerized by its sheer beauty. Walking in silence, an endlessly vast and breathtaking plain unfolds before them. The Dine Plains, welcome to the heart of Araban, territory of the Burke clan. Specifically the region of Zabalin, Aziz is finally home, embraced by his mother. After enduring such harrowing trials, a peaceful reunion is exactly what he needed. Comforting hug from his mom, Tran can only stare blankly, watching a 43-year-old man completely break down in his mother's lap. A stern-looking man steps forward, telling Aziz to maintain his dignity and address her as my lady. Aziz decides to introduce his new friend, explaining that they met. Down south, he explains that Tran is the savior who risked his life to save him. His mother comments that a pilgrimage route really shouldn't be that dangerous. She demands to know exactly what happened and gets livid when he mentions they were attacked by dark elf necromancers. The stern man begs her to calm down, pointing out that people nearby might be watching them. He then asks which noble house Aziz's savior belongs to. His eyes widen as soon as Tran admits that's a tough question to answer. Tran is completely honest, saying that he doesn't really know. He explains his mother was a commoner, and he has no idea who his father is. Hearing this, Aziz completely freezes. He had no clue. The mother acknowledges that Tran isn't from a famous bloodline, but she still thanks him for saving her most precious treasure. She explains that it would be tough to host him inside the family mansion, so she'll arrange for him to stay at the best inn in town instead. Aziz tries to protest, but his mother cuts him off, saying that while it's normally fine, they currently have an extremely important guest staying with them. Suddenly, a red-haired woman walks in and says if she's the reason, they don't need to worry. She points out she highly doubts someone who went out of their way to save Aziz would suddenly try to take her life. Everyone turns to look as she seemingly appears out of nowhere, almost like she stepped right out of the shadows. The light-eyed, red-haired woman looks a bit downcast and drained. Aziz is glad his cousin is being so understanding, but he's confused as to why she's even here in the first place. Watching from afar, Tran quickly realizes this woman is actually the Princess of Arabian. He also notices she looks more like a walking corpse than royalty. He overhears her mention that she was recently almost killed by those worms of Zahar. Aziz is deeply concerned that someone would try to attack the main house again, especially considering how tight their security systems are. She says there's likely a traitor inside their own home, since plenty of people in the family can't stand her. Looking at everyone, she explains she's exhausted and wants to turn in for the night, wishing them all a good evening. With that, Aziz's mother orders her staff to prepare their second-best guest room for her son's savior. Night quickly falls over the estate, even though the bed is incredibly comfortable and the room is pure luxury. Tran just can't seem to fall asleep everywhere he looks. There's nothing but wealth, elegance, and power, but none of it helps him drift off. He ends up staring at the light from a few lamps overhead, which look like strange magical contraptions. Unable to sleep, he decides to get out of bed and explore the house. Suddenly, someone calls out his name and he looks over to see who it is. It's Aziz, who asks if he always wakes up this early, wondering what he's doing wandering the hallway all by himself. Tran points to the device on the wall, explaining that it caught his eye. Aziz. He laughs it off, saying it is the simplest thing ever, just a basic magic lamp that any novice learns to make. But suddenly, blinding flash of light from outside catches their attention. Despite the sudden blast, Tran stays totally calm and keeps his guard up. Aziz explains that his cousin is probably training, mentioning she is always incredibly dedicated. Tran asks if that is her family magic, and Aziz nods, confirming it is the Storm lineage. Aziz says he has never hated his bloodline, but seeing this makes him a bit jealous because she looks like a literal god right now. Tran wonders just how strong the next heir of the Arabian family actually is. Aziz turns to Tran, asking if he wants to see her power up close. He admits he is curious to see how Tran's strength compares to hers. Aziz admits he sparred with Mesa a few years ago and he's still bitter about how it went down, so the two head over to the training grounds to witness just how terrifying she can be. As soon as they call her name, Mesa turns around with a look of pure annoyance. Not at all bothered by them, she demands to know who the guy with her cousin is. Aziz introduces him as Tan, immediately realizing that she already suspects why they came by. He explains they only want to watch her practice her magic and maybe join in for a bit. Mesa mentions it took Aziz a whole week to cast a spell she mastered in just 2 attempts. She says she still remembers the outcome of that old match so well. Hearing that his friend fled crying from that training session, Tran cannot help but laugh. Aziz defends himself, claiming things are different because Tran is one of the most gifted mages he has ever seen. Then he suggests they have a little sparring match to spice things up. Mesa thinks it is ridiculous for her cousin to suggest she fight this guy. Tran just watches her quietly, showing no hint of arrogance. She glares at Tran, wanting to show him how insignificant he is compared to her. Tran does not react, simply looking up at the sky. He sees the clouds completely lit by the energy radiating from Mesa. Soon that massive power starts overflowing from her body. It is clear she is furious about being interrupted during her practice. To teach them a lesson, Mesa unleashes a massive bolt of electricity straight at Tran. He takes the hit directly, even though it hurts like crazy. After a moment, the attack stops and the sky begins to clear up. Tran is shaking badly but stays on his feet, actually finding the whole experience pretty interesting. Though he is drenched in sweat, he manages to withstand the full impact of the blast. As he catches his breath, Tran notices Mesa staring at him with a strange look. She scoffs, saying it is a joke to even call a fight between them a match. Tran gets annoyed hearing Mesa claim he is not even on her level. Aziz steps in, explaining that while Tran has less raw mana, his talent to copy and master spells on the fly is terrifying. He insists that Tran is a magic genius, and even Mesa would not be able to keep pace with him. Hearing all this praise for Tran, she decides to accept the challenge once and for all. Tran proposes a challenge. They will each show a spell the other does not know, and whoever copies it, the fastest caster wins. Aziz loves the idea and asks his cousin if she agrees, but demands they ban bloodline magic. Knowing Tran is clueless about his own origins, she warns him that she's going first, starting right now. The boys brace themselves to watch what she's about to do. Suddenly, green sprouts burst through the dirt and grow rapidly. They multiply in seconds, quickly twisting into massive vines. The plants wrap tightly around Aziz, hoisting him off the ground. As he struggles in midair, Mesa explains this is plant manipulation magic and asks if Tran can replicate it. Dangling up there, Aziz yells to be let down, but Mesa tells him to stay put a bit longer because it is fun. Meanwhile, Tran analyzes her spell. To figure it out, he kneels down, touches the dirt, and tries to copy it. He reasons that fire magic simply creates heat, while water magic draws moisture from the air. These vines must be the same. He just needs To force the seeds in the soil to grow instantly, he commands them. And suddenly they sprout, thick vines shoot out of the ground and wrap round his arm, catching Mesa completely off guard, as is also. Stunned even though he half expected something like this, since Tran used the command grow, Mesa asks if he has seen this magic before, but he claims it is his first time. Back on the ground, as comments that for once Tran did not just babble nonsense. Next, Mesa tells him to propose a challenge. Tran knows using a Zahar spell is suicide. But then he remembers another spell he is able to cast. He points his hand toward a nearby bush. A rat scurries out and runs straight to his feet. Disappointed, Mesa asks if this is just animal taming. Tran explains the rodent is merely a catalyst for his magic. He feels the energy coursing through his body and concentrates, directing his mana straight into the rat. A second later, the creature simply rots away. The sight leaves Mesa completely stunned. Holding the decaying remains, Tran announces that his demonstration is over. Mesa agrees and says it is now her turn to try. With a simple gesture, she calls out, and another rat scurries over. She picks it up, closes her eyes, and begins to channel her mana. The energy flows into the beast, but nothing happens to Mesa pushes even more mana, wondering how Tran pulled this off since it is definitely not standard magic. Azaz asks why he used such a gross spell, and Tran replies, it was just the first thing that came to mind. Tran thinks to himself that his suspicions were right. He wonders if even the prestigious Arabian family is completely clueless about this spell. Watching Mesa struggle, Azaz asks if they can just give the victory to Tran. Already annoyed, she tells him to shut up, insisting she will pull it off. In magic, cause and effect are incredibly complex with so many factors at play. It depends heavily on whether the caster understands the phenomenon they want to trigger, whether it is natural, and how much mana is used. Knowing the mechanics drastically boosts the success rate while lowering the overall mana consumption. Because of this, the only way to force a spell without knowledge is to brute force it with massive amounts of mana, channeling as mustering every single drop of mana she can. Mesa focuses entirely on making the rat rot. Slowly her magic takes hold, and the rodent's flesh finally begins to decay. This completely shocks both of them, as they never believed she actually could manage it. Despite being utterly exhausted, she still boasts about her sudden success. But her strength fails, her eyes flutter shut, and she collapses heavily onto the floor. Azaz rushes to her side, desperately begging her to open her eyes while trying to understand the situation. Simply depleting one's mana reservoir rarely causes someone to lose consciousness. She should only feel incredibly drained, but as he takes a closer look, he spots something off. Examining Mesa's hands, the terrifying truth finally hits him. Scooping her up, he urgently asks if there is a healer nearby, but when learning there is none, he commands the servants to bring salt and water to her room. Carrying her, he realizes she has been burning mana just to keep her own body alive. Honestly, she should not have even been standing. A while later, Mesa finally stirs. Her aunt, looking deeply anxious, immediately asks if she is all right. Straining hard, Mesa sits up and asks how she ended. Here, her aunt explains that Azaz claims she collapsed while training with their guest. Though she highly doubts that story, she presses her to know if that is the real story. Still suspicious, she asks if that strange man did anything to harm her, but Mesa quickly defends Tran, insisting it was not his fault, and begs everyone to leave because of her pounding headache. Before heading out, her aunt mentions she prepared some soup, urging her to eat a little even if her magic has ruined her appetite. Receiving no reply, her aunt sighs and stands up. Just as she reaches the door, Mesa softly thanks her, then sits there with her head bowed, her mind spinning with endless thoughts. But then her eyes drift and spot the warm food her aunt left. She decides to try and eat, but the instant she tastes the soup, she is utterly horrified by what she witnesses. Macabre visions of the dead flash by, including her servants and her own sister. Terrified beyond belief, she drops the bowl, sending hot soup splashing everywhere. Afterward, she curls into a ball, shaking in agony and fear. Meanwhile, deep inside the dark dungeons of the Beck estate, within the temple of the lame goddess, Haram, a loyal family guard, informs Tran there are absolutely no gaps in these solid walls or heavy doors. He warns the prisoner to abandon any escape attempt entirely. Remaining perfectly composed, Tran calmly replies that he understands it. The situation. Stepping closer, the smug guard boasts about how incredibly solid the Masonry is, leaning in, he repeats it again. Tran merely wonders if this guard is simply bragging, but then a sharp sound catches his attention. He hears a blade slicing through the air. The guard, refusing to waste time, has begun practicing his sword techniques right while on duty. Puzzled, Tran asks the guard what he is doing. He claims it is just a warm-up and instantly shifts stances. He follows through with a clean, blindingly fast thrust. After that, a heavy vertical slash tears through the air, whipping up a draft. Observing closely, Tran notes the absolute precision. There is not a single wasted motion, each strike fluidly setting up the next. Suddenly, the guard turns and spots Tran watching his display. Tran quickly apologizes for interrupting his practice. The guard approaches, curiously asking for his opinion on the form. Tran admitted that he found his swordsmanship absolutely incredible. The guard took a step back with a nod, saying he understood. He mentioned that while nobles looked down on martial arts as useless, it was only because they never managed to master them. Tran pointed out that unless a family line focused purely on physical combat, focusing on magic was usually way more efficient, but when pushed to the absolute limit, situations would always arise where magic simply wasn't enough. Haram held out his sword and told Tran to take it. Tran hesitated, asking if it was really a good idea to hand a weapon to a suspect who was currently locked up. Offering the sword again, Haram said it was just a piece of metal, adding that in Tran's current physical state, he couldn't beat him. Anyway, Tran took the sword, wondering what exactly he was supposed to do with it. Haram watched with genuine interest to see what the young man would do. Using a tiny bit of mana, Tan tried to copy the guard's stance. Haram pointed out that he was doing it all wrong. Tran gripped the sword, letting his mystical energy wrap around his entire body. Haram explained that this specific exercise didn't require any mana at all. He instructed him to shift more weight onto his supporting leg, as if his feet were rooted deep into the ground. Haram also told him to raise his arm higher, warning him not to limit his own range of motion. He suggested that if Tran had the time, he should focus on pushing his body to its absolute physical limits. The guard claimed that magic was nothing but a crutch, saying mages mistakenly believed it could replace physical strength. He declared that a well-conditioned body could dominate any battlefield without needing any magical help at all. Suddenly, Tran heard a noise and looked over to see what was going on. Just then, a young woman entered the room. The leader called her out, saying it was highly disrespectful to behave like that toward their benefactor. Tran stepped in, saying he was glad to see she had recovered, and apologized, feeling like his own behavior as a guest was out of line. The young woman said Mesa wanted to apologize to Tran and asked if he had a moment. In another room, Mesa explained she heard he was kept locked up in the temple because of her and sincerely apologized for the trouble. Tran replied that it was a necessary precaution and said her safety was the only thing that matters. She mentioned that the spell he used yesterday to decompose the beasts used an incantation in a completely unknown language. Tran told her that if she understood the basic principles behind it, she would be able to use that magic too. She argued that without proper instruction, there was no way to prove it wasn't actually language-based magic. She worried that if things ended like this, her reputation would be ruined, so she proposed a deal. If he revealed the secret behind that spell, she would teach him a secret technique from Arabian. With that agreed, Tran began to teach her the actual technique. Holding the creature, Mesa asked if the spell was based on biological enhancement by controlling invisible microorganisms. She pointed out that just as she suspected, the spell was incredibly inefficient and wasted a ton of energy, meaning it only worked through sheer brute force. Mesa said she expected as much when they made the bet, since the magic aptitude test didn't actually measure total mana capacity. She suggested calling it a draw to save. She preserves Aziz's pride, mainly because she can't stand dealing with his arrogant attitude. Because of that, she insists on paying what they agreed. Quickly, she grabs a comb and calls it the perfect tool to explain her point. As the boy watches, Mesa begins running it through her hair. Holding the comb near her head, she demonstrates how friction between two objects creates an attraction. Explaining the basic science behind it, the boy finishes her thought, calling the phenomenon static electricity. Surprised, she asks if he already knows about it, and he nods. Now Mesa realizes she needs a better lesson, since she really wanted to teach him something completely new. Turning to him, she suggests they train together until she can think of a fair reward. He smiles, and agrees, suggesting they meet outside every day in the late afternoon. Later. That evening, the dining table is piled high with delicious dishes. They tell everyone to dig in and eat to their heart's content. The young heir is stunned by the massive spread, noting that he doesn't even get this much variety on his birthday. Someone points out that it's a pretty strange comparison to make right. Now, the matriarch then asks him to pick up where they left off in their previous chat. The boy confirms the details, and the young woman asks if there is a specific item he wants. He explains he is looking for personal protection, preferably something to defend against sneak attacks. She replies that it is a common request and easy enough to handle, but she doesn't have anything ready to go right now. The young clan member raises his hand and offers to craft the item himself, explaining he just finished an order for the main family and has some free time. The matriarch asks about his design, and he suggests that a constant wear accessory would provide the best defense against ambushes. He proposes crafting a ring, earring, or necklace that can instantly trigger a protective magic barrier. While it might sound like simple family pride speaking, this item will actually be crafted by an incredibly skilled conjurer. The boy thanks them, but wonders if they're being a bit too generous. The matriarch assures him that during his 30-day stay, he will be treated as an honored guest, so he should just accept it. In another room, the heir mentions that he thinks his mother has taken an interest in the boy. He explains that when he talked to his mother before bed last night, he highly praised the boy's skills and hard work during training. He only wanted to make sure his mother didn't underestimate his friend, but now he realizes her plan is to recruit the young man into the clan. The strategy is to shower him with gifts and eventually win him over using a beautiful young woman. He tells his friend to relax, assuring him the defensive accessory is just a polite gesture. Then he asks if the boy has any plans right now and hears that he has training scheduled with Mesa. The blonde kid points out that training is still hours away, and even if they are not in the capital, the area has plenty of cool spots to check out. He asks his friend if he is really going to waste such a beautiful day cooped up in his room studying magic. He drags his friend along, telling him life is way too short not to have some fun. Elsewhere, a crowd of people is enjoying various games. The heir points toward a counter where people are placing bets. The blonde kid suggests they play too, but the boy he shakes his head, redirecting the airflow toward a different corner of the venue. Tran glances over as something catches his eye, prompting him to take a closer look at a poster on the wall. His eyes widen in disbelief as he reads. He realizes the person featured in the advertisement is actually incredibly famous. The face on the poster looks identical to Kior. Meanwhile, in another part of the venue, deadly weapons are put on display for the crowd, while a narrator begins to explain. He describes how back in 2195, the brave warriors of Araban marched into a hostile desert where a paladin named Kior stood out, assisted by divine forces. Kior conquered his foe after a brutal clash, concluding a truly spectacular performance. The massive spectacle ends as the crowd erupts in applause. The blonde heir asks Tran if he enjoyed the show, and Tran nods, recalling how the veteran warrior claimed to be just a simple soldier. Tran realizes the man was incredibly modest. He resolves to ask Kior if that legend is true, should they meet again. They ever cross paths. Later, in another room, bright morning light streams through the glass window. Tran wakes up, startled by the figure looming over him. Standing right there is the scarred veteran warrior, who immediately asks the young man if Tran has fully recovered yet. Tran nods, quickly inquiring about this surprise visit. The instructor mentions he saw immense physical potential in Tran, leaving Tran struggling to figure out what the man actually means by that. He orders Tran to get up and begin physical training immediately, reminding him that nobody grows stronger by resting. He asks if Tran is ready. Tran silently accepts the challenge, realizing he must seize this chance to learn. Just then, the blonde heir bursts in, eager to talk about a great play. But he suddenly freezes mid-sentence when he spots his uncle in the room. The veteran announces he is leading a training session, suggesting his nephew join in for some healthy exercise. The blonde heir instantly bolts, offering a quick excuse that he is still far too exhausted. Tran wonders why his friend fled, yet hours later Tran fully understands why his friend bolted. The instructor barks at him to push past his physical limits and orders another rep to finish this grueling workout. The veteran demands one last set, Finally, the instructor calls. In a day wrapping up the session, completely exhausted, Tran collapses onto the floor in sheer exhaustion. The veteran asks if he is tired and Tran sighs in agreement. The instructor explains that as a magic caster, Tran is incredibly lucky. He will not face this brutal physical conditioning forever. Tran asks what the difference is, and the veteran explains that an ordinary body weakens over time despite intense training. However, mages use mana to keep their muscles firm, meaning once their body becomes tough as steel, they never lose that power. Smiling, the veteran remarks that this short break should be enough rest. Tran immediately protests, saying he needs far more time to recover. The veteran only grins wider, ignoring the complaint as he tells Tran that his body is finally ready for weapon training and hand-to-hand combat. Training under the fearsome Burke clan proves to be absolutely brutal for Tran. The young mages takes a deep breath, fighting to keep pace with the grueling demands. The veteran explains that they wield a special sword that multiplying his own body weight, warning him that any slip-up will lead to a brutal injury. Back home, Tran trains with Mesa, who urges him to use the friction from his fingertips. 3 whole weeks flash by without either of them even noticing. Suddenly, the surrounding air shifts as a surge of intense energy begins to manifest. The boy sighs, thinking he screwed up another attempt to pull off the technique. Mesa notes that this task is unusually complicated, even for someone with his incredible talent. He explains his struggle makes total sense, since he is not originally from the Arabian territory. Mesa admits she is having a tough time too, since she never imagined she would have to guide an electrical discharge in such a specific way. She asks if it is not as simple as just shooting and hitting a target. But he warns her it is far more complex than that. Suddenly, a voice calls out for Mesa from outside. The intruder looks at the boy, asking Mesa who he is. Mesa coldly barks that it is none of his business, reminding him she strictly banned anyone from the main family from ever coming near her. The man tries to excuse himself, saying the summons came directly from the clan leader, but she warns him there will be consequences for this. The messenger then delivers the grim news. The Dark Elf army has launched a massive invasion in the southern region. He explains that several provinces have already fallen, which is why the Patriarch is mobilizing a military expedition. The boy realizes the enemy has finally struck. After hearing the report, Mesa dismisses the messenger, promising she will return to her family's land soon. With everything going on, she knows it is time to say goodbye to friends she has made. She also intends to pay them back for using that vile decomposition magic. She gazes up at the sky as if offering a prayer to some deity. Then she turns to the boy, asking if he knows that electricity was once part of the human body too. This piece of secret knowledge leaves him deeply lost in thought. Mesa smirks, noting there is no way he could know, since it is a closely guarded secret of her lineage. She says they can consider his debt repaid now that she has trained him properly. She goes on to explain that whenever a person sees or feels something, the body transmits a tiny electrical signal directly to the brain. She explains that this signal travels from the eyes to the brain for sight and from the nose to the brain for smell. Hearing her explanation makes the boy eager to test this power for himself. To him, it feels like he simply needs to observe something as basic as the flapping of a butterfly's wings. She continues her lesson, saying it should not take much for someone as talented as him to spark this power. She explains that he must focus deeply and resonate with the electrical impulses in his muscles. She warns him that at first, the current will feel incredibly tiny, but soon that surge will start flowing through his entire body. She adds that by accelerating those electrical signals along a specific path, he can control exactly where the electricity goes. The boy follows her instructions, doing exactly what she just described. He feels the current course through his entire body, completely unlocking his senses. Two stand in silence, staring at each other as she begins to manifest a magnetism fills the air. A sudden resonance builds and she unleashes her power. Right before his eyes, her expression shifts slightly as she starts to speak. The change is subtle, but the boy immediately understands her entire demonstration. Then it hits him, like millions of lightning bolts ripping through his core. Pure agony tears through his veins. Seeing this, Mesa smiles, knowing he did it. She explains that the pain only comes from recklessly releasing his own mana. The coming headaches will make it tough to adapt at first, she warns. But once he gets the hang of it, keeping this power active will become natural. Although Tran is incredibly grateful for the lesson, he can't help but feel that whatever he offered in return is absolutely nothing compared to such magic. Suddenly she leaps high into the air, telling him to view it as an incentive. Bit of an investment, she playfully teases that if he masters even stronger magic, in the future she'll return to collect. Tan is left standing there just watching her drift away. Her fading voice echoes from above as she warns that she will bill him for every single lesson. Meanwhile, a lone eagle soars swiftly across the sky. From the bird's eye view, massive military divisions are assembling below. They march in Morgan, the legendary heart of the Dine Plains. The elite soldiers serving under House Arabian are celebrated for their unmatched valor. Though they are only departing to hunt down dark elves, it feels like a grand triumphant victory parade. Ez points toward the spectacle and tells his companion that with an army this massive, wiping out the necromancers is guaranteed. Catching sight of his cousin in the crowd, he waves frantically to get her attention, but he is instantly scolded to behave as a proper noble should. Excitement ripples through the crowd as the family head arrives, making Tran and company gaze upward with immense pride. Before them, the entire army stands at attention, awaiting commands. Tran finally realizes that this legendary figure leads the great House Arabian. This stern, red-haired warrior is indeed their current patriarch. Nearby onlookers stare at Badal Arabian, whispering nervously about the terrifying glare in his eyes. Additionally, Tran notices that the patriarch looks incredibly pale and sickly. Rumors suggest he suffered a near-fatal wound long ago while fighting the leader of House Azar, but since that clash occurred decades ago, Tran assumes it's just old age catching up. Suddenly, the mood completely shifts and the once energetic crowd begins to lose all of its confidence. Several anxious onlookers scan the heavens as if bracing for an impending disaster from above. Right then, the sky begins to darken rapidly. Suddenly, the patriarch raises his hands as if to offer a solemn blessing. His eyes glow with a new hue, proving he is actively channeling his massive mana. Seconds later, his magic surges directly into the rolling storm clouds. To the crowd, this blinding flash represents the ultimate strength of House Arabian. The onlookers erupt in cheers, chanting prayers to the Lord of Thunder to guard his legacy. Tran is stunned that even with a failing physical body, this warrior can still summon such a colossal showcase of power. He blankets the entire horizon in crackling lightning, proving his absolute mastery of magic. Sometime later, Tran receives a rare artifact designed to boost his physical defenses instantly. Even without channeling a single drop of mana, his natural defense rises to rival the protective auras of elite highborn nobles. Guardian lineage. The youth handing it over warns him that it drains a lot of mana, warning him not to keep the item active for too long. Tran is incredibly grateful, realizing this is an incredible treasure. The matriarch mentions that if he wants to, he is more than welcome to formally join their family. She has always treated him with fondness, especially out of deep gratitude for saving her precious child. Tran thanks her, but he knows things are never that simple. She explains she already heard his story from her son, knowing he has his own path to walk. Tran thanks the lady, promising he will never forget the kindness she showed him. After saying goodbye to the matriarch, Tran gets ready to set off. That is when he notices a crowd gathered to see him off, each of them deeply grateful for what Tran did for one of their kin. Suddenly, someone tosses him an item and tells him to take it. The man explains it is a magical tool with no wild abilities, but it is incredibly tough and has a razor-sharp blade. Tran thanks him from his heart, knowing this tool is going to be incredibly useful. Deeply touched, the man even addresses Tran as master. Right after that, a soft smile plays on Tran's lips. With a nod, he turns around and continues down the path, ever the loyal ally. As his hands Tran a cloak. As soon as the fabric drapes over his shoulders, Tran asks what it is. His friend reminds him of his envy over their traditional garments, explaining that this fabric repels dirt effortlessly. Azaz then presents him with more attire, noting that the enchanted threads self-repair when torn. Tran is thrilled with his clean new cloak, shirt, trousers, and sturdy gear. Once the gifts are traded, his friend asks where Tran plans to go next. Turin takes a deep breath, explaining he is heading to Carmen, a city Azaz has also visited. Knowing the place, Azaz offers some crucial advice, warning him to avoid traveling by sea as the waves out there are brutal, as a sign of their friendship. His friend tells him to stay safe and return one day to pay him back for the cloak. Time slips by and Tran is seen traveling down the road. He walks along peacefully, reflecting on the fact that he must travel the rest of the way on his own. Now, because he is alone, he decides to pick up the pace and run as fast as possible. Gaining sudden speed, he flies past everyone on the road like a bullet. Startled travelers turn around to see what just happened. Others feel certain something just zipped past them, but they cannot quite tell what it was. Moving at that blistering speed, he blazes past the village houses. He also sprints along the shores of local lakes. Tran runs so fast for so long that he finally feels his body demanding a slower pace. He keeps jogging, though not nearly as fast as before, until he eventually slows to a walk. By now, he is practically at the foot of the mountain. From here on out, he decides to rely on his sharp sense of smell, which has never failed him. He calms his breathing to sniff the air and instantly picks up a scent coming from a specific direction. At first, he assumes it is just a simple campfire, but then he detects a disgusting stench like charred flesh. He focuses his senses even harder to pinpoint the foul odor originates. That is when he stumbles upon a horrific scene. Village lay in ruins, completely pillaged, burned to the ground, and utterly abandoned. Decomposing bodies litter the ground. Many of them had been tied up before their execution. He suspects bandits did this, since the dark elves shouldn't be out this far. Still, something feels deeply wrong, and it feels like crucial pieces are missing from the puzzle. Eager to find out what happened, he decides to venture deeper inside, but all he finds are charred remains and absolute devastation. No matter how hard he searched, Tran only uncovered the ruins of an ancient civilization. He gripped the handles on the floor, testing for a hidden basement below. With a powerful grip, he yanked the doors to break them off their hinges. The moment they flew open, his face turned utterly pale. Inside the cellar, he spotted someone looking exactly like the goddess of corruption. The little girl jumped in terror as the doors were suddenly busted open. Tran stepped down the stairs, urging her to calm down, promising he wasn't a threat. Hearing his words, she relaxed a little. Realizing he wanted to help, he gently approached and asked her to share what happened. She whispered that someone had wiped out everyone in the village, suspecting it was a mage. While speaking, her energy completely faded, causing her to collapse. Tran caught her in his arms, glad she wasn't injured, only utterly exhausted. His main goal now was finding safety. Suddenly, a voice shouted that they had finally located their target. Looking up, he saw a finger pointing straight at his chest. Tran was surrounded by an armed group led by an enraged woman. She ordered him to drop to his knees, warning him there wouldn't be a second chance. Clearly, she mistook Tan for the monster who destroyed the village. Losing patience, she demanded that he put the kid down immediately. Beside her, another trembling mage stood ready to take him down. Tran tried to ease the tension, explaining that this was all just a big misunderstanding, but the hostile group refused to listen. They were primed to strike at any moment. Weapons were ready to fire. Without warning, suddenly, the woman screamed at her companion not to fire blindly, warning him he might hit the child. He quickly apologized for the blunder. While the woman stared in disbelief, Tran had raised his bare hand, shielding himself and the child from the impact. As the smoke cleared, they saw him standing unharmed, cradling the little girl. Tan glanced at his newly acquired artifact, never expecting to use it so soon. The surrounding mages watched in absolute shock. He didn't have a single scratch on his body, blocking their spell effortlessly. What terrified them most was that he used absolutely no magic, relying entirely on raw physical defense. The leader's eyes narrowed, demanding to know what kind of monstrous lineage possessed such insane physical defense. Tran called out to them again, reiterating that he wasn't their enemy, and that this was a misunderstanding. He warned them that another attack would force his hand. His deadly threat made the archer hesitate. She knew she had to put the young child's safety above her anger. She lowered her bow, admitting it made absolutely no sense for someone to unleash this level of destruction for nothing. Still, she found it hard to believe he only stayed behind to save a child. Introducing herself, she asked for his name, explaining that even though all the evidence pointed to his guilt, she was willing to trust his story. Tran suggested they just ask the little girl when she woke, since she was the only witness, but as he spoke, he noticed someone in the party reacting very strangely. Meanwhile, the young blonde girl doubted. The kid actually saw the killer. She brought up the culprit's nickname, Finding. It's strange that our hero knew nothing. Let's look at what she explained next. The killer is a rogue mage, terrorizing isolated villages for months. Because he leaves 0 survivors, nobody even knows if the villain is a man or a woman. The only certainty is his nickname, the Flame Maniac, earned from the fires he leaves behind. Once the little girl finally woke, she described the culprit as a bearded man in a red cloak. She said he looked like a terrifying lumberjack. Tension filled the air, and the woman glanced at the traveler. Realizing this description did not match him at all, they decided to apologize for their hostile behavior earlier. This reminded the young man of an old noble friend who also apologized whenever he made a mistake. He shrugged off their suspicion, noting that their priority was simply the child's safety. Then he asked if they were heading to the city to hunt down this flame maniac. The blonde girl replied that with a description, catching him would be easy since they had a natural-born tracker with them. Now this is where things get interesting. He asked if they belonged to the Zahar family and what they were doing out here. The blonde waved her hands, explaining her name was Bon Carmen, from the Carmen house in Acha. She added that her companions were from vassal families and only Asha was a descendant of the Zahar bloodline. Bon explained that Asha's power manifested weakly, a trait they called a primitive bloodline. She then asked if he would help them hunt down the flame maniac. She offered him the entire bounty, promising even her share of mana. He listened closely, asking how strong this pyromaniac actually was. Bison chimed in, calling him a noble-level mage because he easily defeated trained knights in the past. He figured this opponent was perfect for him, since weak road beasts weren't helping him level up. He looked at her and accepted the hunt. The group decided to get the little girl to safety first, bringing her to a nearby village. Paying a local family to raise her, they left a stern warning that they would be watching. He even added that he would randomly drop by in a few years to check on her. This warning instantly put the greedy foster father on high alert. Afterward, the party returned to the charred ruins. Let's see if their tracker can find a clue. Surely she would find something. Suddenly, the girl's eyes began to glow, signaling her search had begun. She pointed toward the forest and guided them, warning the party that they had a long hike ahead of them. As we search the burnt ruins with them, deep tracks finally appear. These heavy gouges form a trail of destruction, leading straight into the forest. Our tracker relies on her sharp nose to catch the suspect's scent. She kneels, feeling the dirt and sniffing specific patches of earth. Looking back, she explains to the protagonist that she needs human footprints first. Then she will track the ash. The killer is bound to reek of it. His clothes would be covered in soot. Suddenly, her eyes go wide. She has found something. Without warning, she bolts into the trees. She is chasing the fresh scent, ignoring her allies shouting for her to wait. Running ahead alone is suicide, but she keeps dashing forward anyway. She weaves through the forest, heading straight for the mountain's base. Ahead, she discovers a hidden tunnel. They are close now. The young blonde turns to the protagonist, telling him to take the lead. The rest of the group will watch his back. Next, she summons light. A glowing sphere of magic rests in her palm, illuminating the dark path. With the cavern lit, they follow the tracker deeper into the shadows. The blonde whispers, asking if the scent is still active inside this cave. The tracker focuses her skills. Someone is definitely lurking in the dark. With that chilling confirmation, they press on in the direction she points. As they navigate the damp tunnel, the blonde falls silent, lost in thought. Further ahead, the torches on the stone walls suddenly flare to life. Bathed in light, a bizarre figure stands waiting for them in the cavern. He glares with an unsettling grin, demanding to know why they are here. The protagonist doesn't hesitate, asking the stranger if he is the arsonist. The tracker immediately nods, confirming she smells that exact foul scent. The archer agrees he matches the profile, but urges caution first. They must verify his identity before making any reckless moves. The man cackles, noting in a bizarre voice that they seem to love trouble. He promises that if it's a fight they want, they came to the right place. In fact, he boasts that he can easily roast them like kebabs. To prove his threat, violent sparks fly as he ignites fires around them. His magical energy surges, and wild flames rapidly consume the small cavern. The protagonist is fully prepared, bracing himself to shield his allies. Activating a defensive skill, he deploys a massive shield to protect them. The fire misses entirely. The rogue mage stares, shocked his flames failed. While the villain is left bewildered, the archer seizes the opening. She unleashes a rapid stream of deadly arrows directly at the enemy. One sharp projectile tears clean through his leg, dealing devastating damage. The sheer impact of the arrow is so intense that he can barely stay standing. His eyes roll back, and he teeters on the edge of losing consciousness. Yet, even in blinding agony, the rogue refuses to let them escape so easily. He unleashes a second hidden magic, summoning colossal stone claws. The protagonist realizes the villain can also manipulate the earth. It is a shocking double affinity, but we have no time to lose. Our protagonist wastes no time, preparing to deliver a decisive counterstrike. Slingshot channeling his mana to charge up the stone before firing. The fire starter refuses to back down, gearing up for another ambush. But our hero knows that planning an attack is useless without hands to fight. He aims to take those hands away. Inside the cavern, things turn terrifying. Even the crazy arsonist begins to sweat. That is when Tran reveals he picked up some wild tricks from a buddy in the previous town. Now he can channel lightning directly into his weapon, making every single shot lethal. The insane shock is so devastating it forces the rogue's eyes to roll back. He instantly drops, completely paralyzed, but as the villain falls, a stone trap shatters, collapsing right over one of the girls. Still, Tran stays focused. On finishing the job and putting this criminal down for good, she watches in absolute disbelief, stunned by how easily he just dismantled the entire threat. With the danger cleared, he pulls out some bizarre seeds. Tran tosses them straight at the defeated target. Within seconds, the magical properties of the seeds activate. A binding spell takes hold, completely paralyzing the rogue and blocking his vision. Stepping closer with a dagger, Tran demands his full cooperation. The captive looks ready to spit venom, but he clearly requires some extra persuasion. Pressing the cold steel directly against the rogue's throat, Tran stares him down, telling him to keep quiet and remember his place. If he dares to channel any energy, he dies right here. He demands some real answers. But the prisoner only mutters about how a bunch of kids tracked him down. Annoyed, our hero tells him that's a secret. He demands to know why. This corrupted noble has been reducing villages and innocent people to ashes. The lunatic claims that God ordered the purge. His words send chills through everyone. It is completely insane. Suddenly, he shrieks that his deity revealed a way to absorb the magic of other bloodlines. He truly believes that sacrificing a few more lives will unlock the legendary flame essence for him. The blonde girl thinks he has completely lost it. That is just impossible. No one can steal a bloodline like that. Tran is deeply disgusted by the sheer horror committed for such a delusion, yet a thought strikes him. Trying to piece it all together, now you and I might remember someone from his past mentioning that normal folks could gain power by defeating vile beasts. That was Madame, who claimed she witnessed mages do it. Now listening to this monster ramble about burning lives to steal their firepower. Dark realization hits him. This might not be the senseless babble of a madman gripping the rogue's arm. Tran considers a chilling theory. Maybe this psycho stumbled onto the hidden truth of this fantasy world. With one quick slash, Tran puts him down. The heavy silence of death fills the cave as the body drops. Behind him, one ally looks pale and sick, prompting Bond to check on him. The young man whispers that execution felt too cold, more like a slaughter than justice. Bond snaps at him to get a grip, reminding him that this monster almost murdered their entire party. He destroyed countless families, and death was honestly too easy of a punishment. While they argue, Tran notices a tattered leather notebook sitting in the dust. Flipping it open, his eyes widen at the chilling secrets written inside. The notebook held records of every single village attacked, serving as proof of the villain's crimes, but as he flips the page, Tran freezes in shock. The journal contains strange magic formulas he has never seen before, making him wonder if they were also taught by that mysterious voice called God. Suddenly, Bond calls out to him while he's lost in the text. She tells him they are going to absorb the mana now. The four of them begin absorbing all the remaining mana inside the body. Sometime later, a representative congratulates Bison on the capture, saying a new star is rising in The Carmine family, she accepts the reward, claiming the praise is a bit much. Bon then tells Tran that her party plans to keep traveling and hunting. Deadly monsters, she hands Tran his split of the gold, asking what he plans to do now. Tran replies that he is hitting the road immediately, heading straight for Acha. Bon steps closer, warning him not to repeat anything that crazy fire. Lunatic said since it would trigger total chaos, they say their goodbyes. Confident their paths will cross again someday, Tran figures there is no point in spreading his doubts just yet, especially since he lacks any real proof. He begins his long trek through the desert toward the city. Vecha, along the way, he notices the air is growing increasingly humid. Tran snaps his fingers to conjure a quick spell. Watching the weak flame flicker, he realizes casting fire magic will be difficult in this damp climate. On the bright side, a completely different element feels incredibly easy to wield, his water. Spells are far more potent, barely draining any mana. This can only mean one thing: he has finally arrived at his destination, Acha, inside a local tavern. A patron asks if they are set to sail tomorrow. The captain nods, confirming they must head back toward the Enreal Desert, but reminding everyone they will have to fight off mermen along the way. The crew adds to the captain's anxiety, noting they must also keep an eye out for pirates. The captain groans that at this rate, he will be buying coffins instead of paying their actual wages. Overhearing the conversation, Tran steps up to the table, asking if they are truly bound for the Emerald Desert. The captain nods but warns him that the vessel is entirely packed. He explains that to squeeze anyone else in, he would have to dump alcohol, which violates his core principles. In response, Tran simply rests his hand over mug on the table. Perplexed, the captain asks what he is doing. Moments later, Tran completely freezes the drink solid. The captain gapes in disbelief, unable to believe he is standing before a mage. Recognizing his talent, everyone at the table leaps up to kiss up to him, but Tran tells them to just act natural. The captain asks what he wants, and Tran explains he needs passage to the Enreal Desert. He clarifies he does not want to travel as a passenger, but as guard duty to defend the vessel from mermen and raiders. The captain explains his boat is humble, so they cannot offer high pay or comfortable private quarters. For the trip, Tran reassures him, saying the pay and conditions do not matter as long as he reaches Enil. Hearing this, the captain practically leaps from his chair with joy. He accepts the deal, welcoming Tran to join the crew. On the spot, the moment they arrive at the docks, the captain welcomes Tran aboard his modest vessel. Meanwhile, in an entirely different region, several flames devour the village. As you and I can see, absolute chaos grips the region. Out of control, a lone knight grips his sword, paralyzed by pure terror. Right before him, a massive demon glares. He struggles to find his courage. Steel flashes, slicing the beast in half. Instantly, his eyes dart to the side. Spotting a dark elf rushing him, he drops the foe, but another dark elf materialized right behind him, pouring all his remaining strength into his blade. He cleaves his attacker and uses the momentum to strike the next. But another enemy ambushes him. The brutal conflict seems completely endless as a massive horde of dark elves begins to surround the knight from all sides. This warrior desperately realizes he won't survive if the intense battle keeps going like this, but suddenly, tiny blue sparks of electricity begin to crackle. High above, they erupt into massive lightning bolts, striking down every hostile surrounding the knight. Stunned by the sudden magic, he looks back. He realizes that Mesa saved his life. He breathes a quick thank you and she orders him to fall back to the main army immediately. The soldier nods and bolts toward his allies. Suddenly, Kadram emerges right behind Mesa and asks if she is injured. She brushes it off, but he still urges caution, claiming her life is worth far more than some common soldiers. Mesa reassures him she is all right. Asking how the siege goes, Kadram reports they have almost cleared the zone, though the hidden passage remains lost. Mesa nods and demands to be notified the moment they locate it. She plans to go in alone. With that, she takes flight, leaving Kadram watching her depart. With utter annoyance, he mutters about how incredibly irritating she is, complaining that her brother spoiled her rotten. He worries that if she continues down this reckless path, she will share their family's tragic fate. Let's join Tran as he stares at the open sea from a sailing vessel. Completely lost in his thoughts, he realizes he has no clear plan once he arrives in the Zahar Empire. He has no clue where his father lies, and slipping into enemy territory unprepared is a suicide mission. All he possesses is a small painting of his mother and some old keepsakes. He has no clue how long finding a real lead will take as he broods over his options. Footfalls approach from behind. The ship's captain steps up and asks what is weighing on his mind. Tran admits he was simply contemplating the sheer scale of the sea. The captain asks if he feels sick, but Tran insists he is perfectly fine. The captain notes he heard Tran is learning basic sailing from the first mate. Tran nods, adding that it has been surprisingly enjoyable. Just then, a loud voice cuts across the deck as a sailor calls out that dinner is served. The captain smiles, waving everyone toward the galley. Tran digs into his plate, though the food looks completely unappealing. At the same time, a nearby crewman thanks the heavens for their sauerkraut supply. He loudly explains that without it, their gums would rot away from scurvy. Intrigued by this, Tran asks how they discovered such a cure, and the sailor shrugs, saying a wise explorer figured it out and word spread. He jokes that before this knowledge, desperate crewmen would resort to eating raw mermaids. Suddenly, an alarm blares. A mid-sized ship has appeared directly ahead. A crewman shouts up to the lookout, but he cannot identify the ship. He warns that the ship flies no flags. Another sailor mutters in dread. They look exactly like pirates, and this calm weather was too good to last. The peaceful silence was a trap. Instantly, the crew grabs their weapons. Preparing for battle, a panicked sailor asks what the plan is now. That vessel is far faster, and running away is completely out of the question. But if the wind turns in their favor, they could reach a nearby island. The captain turns to Tran, asking if he can take care of this mess. Tran answers that as long as no knights or nobles are aboard, it is easy. The captain nods, instantly ordering the crew to turn and face the enemy. Preparing to strike, the crew swiftly shifts course to confront the threat. Sailing directly alongside the hostile vessel, the pirates watch them approach. The pirates scream for them to halt, offering mercy if they surrender. Tran wonders aloud if they will truly show mercy, but a nearby sailor scoffs. He asks if being fed to the sharks counts as mercy. Hearing that, Tran prepares for battle. Taking a running start, he leaps straight toward the enemy ship. Landing on the pirate ship, Tran catches them completely off guard. No one expected a single person to jump aboard an enemy vessel alone. It seemed suicidal, but suddenly the ocean water begins to surge upward. The rising water freezes instantly, shaping into deadly, jagged ice spikes. Realizing he is a mage, the pirates rush forward to stop his deadly spell, but they are far too slow, and most of them are instantly impaled by ice spikes. Tran stares at his enemies, knowing this absolute scum deserves no mercy whatsoever. There is absolutely no reason to let even one of them survive. Knowing these villains possess no honor, he unleashes a ruthless offensive. The remaining pirates descend into chaos, screaming at each other to act. They must move fast, or death will claim every single one of them. Summoning whatever courage they have left, a few of them charge at Tran. They know how this will end. Tran simply stares them down with cold eyes. His steady gaze reflects the deep ocean. He knows exactly what must happen. Instantly, the surrounding sea begins to rage violently, faced with absolute terror. Some pirates choose to charge forward and fight, while others desperately leap overboard. Yet no matter their choice, everyone on this deck shares the same fate. Though paralyzed with fear, the desperate crew continues their relentless onslaught. They strike with everything they have, fully aware their lives are on the line. They hope that overwhelming the young mage all at once will grant them survival. Too bad for them, Tran is resolved to destroy anyone blocking his path. His movements grow swifter and more precise, allowing him to dominate the battlefield. He easily handles multiple attackers. With a single glance, he anticipates their strikes. He evades every blow effortlessly. The pirates quickly realize close combat is suicide. Fighting him up close is a fatal mistake, as he parries every strike. Showcasing legendary martial prowess, he redirects the momentum of one attacker. He uses it to instantly slay another. Absolute panic grips the entire deck. Everyone wants this nightmare to end quickly, prompting Tran to shift his strategy. Oddly, the more enemies he cuts down, the more armed pirates appear, trying to surround him, but Tran sticks to his plan, fighting on while controlling the massive waves crashing around the ship whenever he needs to. Tran backs off slightly to create some space and prep his next spell. He knows that certain magical attacks work much better when cast from a safe distance, and the rough sea obeys his command with growing fury. He keeps using his water control to strike heavy blows, crushing the enemies who still try to resist. Tran's magic shapes the seawater into sharp spears, skewering his opponents with ease. A few pirates still think they can catch him off guard in the middle of this chaos, but their illusion of an advantage instantly vanishes against the overwhelming power and preparation of the young mage. Right then, one of the fighters grabs Tran, yelling to the others that he has him pinned. The rest of the crew starts slashing at him, thinking he is trapped, but soon one thug's eyes go wide. He realizes that no matter how hard they strike, their sharp blades are not leaving a single scratch on Tran. His body seems heavily armored, as if no blade could ever pierce him. Since his enemies cannot hurt him, Tran decides to strike back, refusing to waste any more time. He easily takes down multiple opponents at the exact same time. His counterattack is so swift and brutal that his enemies do not even have time to devise a plan. The moment he realizes these pirates deserve no mercy, their fate is sealed. For a long time, the only sounds echoing across the vessel are screams of absolute terror. In the end, only Tan remains standing on the deck, holding his magic sword. Every single pirate who was once so confident they could crush any opponent has been wiped out. This victory gives the sailors from the other ship the perfect excuse to claim the vessel as plunder. The whole crew is thrilled, giving a lift to this mysterious stranger. Turned out to be an amazing deal. The captain praises Tran, joking that he also makes an excellent janitor. He keeps the joke going, saying if Tran keeps cleaning up this spotlessly, his own crew will be out of a job. Noticing the blood splattered all over Tran, a crew member suggests he see the ship's doctor. Tran reassures them they do not need to worry, since all that blood belongs to the enemy, and with that they set sail. The fleet, which started with just one ship, now sails with two, and the leaders gather inside the captain's quarters. The captain explains that the recovered vessel is actually a merchant ship that went missing a few years ago. Tran is surprised when the captain reveals that he is actually the rightful owner of the recovered ship. Once the shock wears off, Tran asks the captain what he plans to do with the vessel. The captain replies that there are plenty of options, like returning it to its original owner for a reward. But his plan is to sell the ship in the Northern Sea Archipelago, which is right on their route. He explains that they are desperate for ships over there, so vessels always sell for top dollar. Tran knows he must pay the crew for using their ship for transport, so Tran proposes splitting a share of the profits, including the money from selling the vessel as a service fee for the sailors. The captain finds the offer highly appealing and agrees to the deal. While they are talking, a crew member bursts in, panicking, shouting that they had caught a mermaid. Instantly, the captain panicked, dreading an ambush by Marowak. However, the sailor quickly explained it wasn't like that. The crew had actually locked up a captured mermaid below deck. Both men listened closely as he warned them about it, of the situation. To keep their end of the deal, the crew set to work scrubbing the deck. Meanwhile, the captain wanted to make sure this rare prize was actually down below. He took the chance to invite Tran down for a quick look. On their way down, Tran wondered if mermaids usually fetched a fortune. The captain noted that prices varied, but a stunning female could easily bring triple the normal amount. Stepping inside, the captain joked about how folks on the mainland were utterly obsessed with rare mythical beasts and legends. Reaching the dark hold, Tran saw the creature huddled in the dark corner, but upon closer inspection, they realized it was male, which ruined its market value. The captain sighed, realizing they could barely make any money on him. He was tiny and completely unimposing. At best, they would only profit if he was legendary royal blood, able to transform into a fish. Offended, the captive snapped back, claiming he was no ordinary merman, but Armani, 47th Prince of the Northern Seas. The captain and Tran whispered, agreeing that if this kid was royalty, as he claimed, he might be worth a fortune after all. But the captain suspected a lie to avoid being dumped, demanding to see him transform. The young merman argued that he could not shift his shape while dried out and bound by ropes. It really seemed like a desperate trick to break free. The captain asked Tan what he planned to do with the find. Tran decided to get rid of him because mermen were notorious man-eaters. Staring down at the huddled captive in the corner, they agreed they could not risk letting him escape into the ocean and warn others. Tan prepared to unleash the power to end his life. Facing certain death, the sea prince shrieked, demanding to know how They dared do this, yet deadly energy continued to gather in Tran's palm. As he charged, the boy wept, swearing he had never eaten a human in his whole life, but they tuned out his desperate pleading entirely. Without a trace of mercy, he gritted his teeth, eyes wide with dread. Suddenly an idea struck. He barked at the man with the glowing palm, promising to lead them to a massive treasure if they spared him. Seeing he had their attention, the young merman felt a sudden spark of hope. Of survival, he claimed the gold was left by the gods of Freya, whom they worshipped. The boy's life was spared for now, and before long they finally sighted land. The port town loomed ahead and the crew cheered their arrival. They were eager to grab a drink after the dry voyage. Across the open sea, once docked, the captain asked if Tran had decided on his plan. Tran agreed to check out the location since it was close enough to return by tonight. They grabbed the heavy chains binding the young captive, shoving his prisoner into a small rowboat. Tran prepared. He heads out with him into the open sea. The young sea prince asks if they chained him up because they feared he would run. He boasts that as royalty, a royal always keeps his word. Tran just listens in silence, steering the boat forward using nothing but his raw magic. As they glide along, the kid warns him not to blame him if the treasure is a disappointment. Night falls over the ocean. Tran ignores his excuses and simply tells him to keep leading the way. Once they reach the exact coordinates, Tran gets ready and plunges straight into the water, sinking deep to begin his search for the goddess's treasure. Below the waves, he starts scanning his surroundings. Just as he suspected, a massive, incredibly powerful sea serpent guards the ancient ruins. Now he must face this colossal beast's sheer power. Fortunately, Tan is relieved when he spots the small island the merman mentioned appearing in the distance, boasting a truly beautiful view. He dips his hands into the water, pushing the small boat even faster while using his scouting magic to check for any threats lurking above or below. He is incredibly relieved no mermaids are around, as dealing with them would be a massive pain. Fortunately, this is clearly not their home territory. Even though rough tides crash hard against the jagged rocks, everything feels peaceful. A moment later, their small boat floats empty. As they both head into the dense forest, the merman scans their surroundings, absolutely sure their destination is somewhere nearby. However, he doesn't spot it instantly. Looking closer, he realizes the path is actually much closer than he thought. The merman points toward the correct direction, but our protagonist stares, questioning if the guide is telling the truth. The area looks completely ordinary, just a calm, quiet lake. He tells the merman the water does not look deep, but the little guy claims it is 300 meters deep. To them, that is nothing. But for humans, it is a daunting depth. Before long, he uses a nearby tree to tie the merman up. The little prince hates being bound again and complains about being doubted, swearing he would never try to run away. Anxious, the merman points out that if his captor fails and never returns, he will end up starving to death tied to this tree. Stripping off his clothes, he warns the merman to pray for his victory and safe return. He stands there for a moment, watching his reflection ripple slowly in the lake's water, takes a deep breath to build up his courage, and dives straight into the depths. He plunges down, swimming as fast as he can to reach the bottom in record time. In the dark blue depths of the lake, he must search for his prize, scanning the area to find it as quickly as possible. After all, he cannot breathe underwater since he lacks that kind of ability. Eventually, he reaches a slightly brighter area where visibility is much better. Still holding his breath for dear life, he moves closer to something catching his eye. His eyes widen underwater at what lies right in front of him, a bizarre figure. Looks like a giant, completely petrified snake. This creature is colossal, but right at the very top, he spots there stands the statue of a knight who apparently fought the giant serpent. He is absolutely blown away by the view, momentarily forgetting he is deep underwater and about to gasp. Catching himself, he clamps a hand over his mouth, desperate to save his remaining oxygen. He paddles as fast as possible toward the incredible sight. Even in its petrified state, the colossal serpent looks terrifying, yet he traveled all this way for the ultimate prize. He scales the statue to see if his gamble actually pays off. Inspecting the ancient warrior who battled the beast, nothing stands out. At first, he cannot even tell if this warrior truly belonged to Freya's divine tribe. It seems hard to believe his flesh remains entirely whole after all this time. Suddenly, something Glowing on the dead man's belt catches his eye. It looks just like a golden compass. This has to be the legendary divine treasure. Meanwhile, back on the shoreline, the young merman remains bound to the tree. Seconds later, the hero bursts through the surface, gasping for air. The boy cheers and eagerly asks if he secured the treasure, catching his breath. Tran replies that he found something, though he still is not sure what it actually does. Looking closely at the young merman, Tran can suddenly perceive his life force. The boy's raw spiritual energy and greatest strengths are laid bare right before him, holding the golden compass. Tran wonders if this unique artifact is revealing everyone's vital signs and internal energy. If that is the case, he will uphold his end of the bargain, reaching toward the captive merman to channel a bit of his power. Instantly, the heavy iron chains binding the young merman shatter. The little captive never expected to be freed so easily. He assumed he would be sold off once more. Tran tells him he always honors his debts, and since the kid kept his promise, he did the same. As Tran gets dressed, the grateful merman calls him a surprisingly nice demon. With that quick thanks, the boy dives straight back into the lake. The moment he hits the water, he begins transforming into a massive, majestic fish, proving this young merman really is royalty. Watching him, Tran realizes the kid was entirely innocent all along. Shortly after, the ship is seen moored at the bustling harbor. As soon as Tran steps back on deck, he notices several sailors receiving punishment. They are being disciplined for the chaos they caused back in the village. Surveying the scene, Tran asks what is happening. A crewmate explains that the men are paying for ignoring orders the previous night. They defied the captain's strict warnings, leaving a trail of destruction and triggering a massive brawl at the local tavern. With his new power, Tran easily reads the life force of every man standing there. He watches their vitality plummet as they endure the harsh, heavy blows. Once finished, Tran decides to head into town to secure some supplies. Meanwhile, the ship's captain is pitching a sale to an interested buyer. The captain flinches when their guest enters, realizing Tran has arrived right in the middle of their private negotiation. The captain introduces the stranger as Captain Samuel, who has agreed to purchase the vessel. Tran considers the proposal and finds it fair, but spots one glaring problem. For someone who only knows quiet village life, carrying around that much heavy gold is going to be a massive headache. Tran thinks it would be much better to swap it for powerful magic items or sacred relics instead. Samuel suggests that Tran head to the territory's second largest city, a bustling place home to a legendary lineage of beast tamers. Since Tran has deep pockets, tracking down a powerful companion shouldn't be hard at all. After settling their plans, they set sail once more. At first, the voyage seems perfectly smooth, and the crew figures their only problem is hauling around all that coin, but the lookout soon spots dark storm clouds looming right ahead. Within seconds, the sky turns pitch black and the weather turns brutal. Giant waves slam into the vessel, tossing it violently from side to side as desperate orders echo to pull in the sails immediately. Every single piece of cargo must go below deck if they want to survive this. With each passing second, the sea grows more vicious. Taking a single step on the wet deck is a gamble, and several men are swept straight overboard. The crew is caught in a nightmare. They must pull down the sails, but doing so means risking a plunge into the freezing, angry sea. Luckily for these sailors, they have Kim on board. He acts instantly, unleashing his powers to rescue both the men and the cargo. Telekinesis is just one of the many incredible abilities he has fully mastered. He uses his mind magic to secure the sails, urging the exhausted crew to seek safety in the hold below. Still channeling his energy, he stabilizes the ship's path to keep it steady. Without Kim's razor-sharp control, the ship and everyone on board would have been swallowed by the dark depths. Ultimately, everyone makes it out safely thanks to his perfect execution. Outside, the storm still rages as lightning tears through the black sky. Meanwhile, the crew gathers to warm up in a dry, cramped cabin inside the ship. Many of them are shivering from the icy sea, their clothes totally drenched from the heavy waves crashing over the deck. Kim grows concerned and asks if they are all right, but using his heightened senses, he can tell a few of them are in terrible shape. The captain thanks him, admitting they would all be dead if not for his incredible power and fast action. When asked if they can outrun the storm, the captain says it depends on the hull and the helmsman. Still, it is clear that the entire crew is trembling from the bitter cold. Seeing this, Kim decides to do something to warm them up. He steps forward and tells everyone to gather closely around him in a tight circle. With all his years at sea, the captain instantly worries that Kim is planning to start a fire, which would be suicidal on a dry wooden ship, but Kim quickly promises that he will keep the flame tiny and completely contained. True to his word, he conjures a small ember to warm the shivering crew. The heat from the spark spreads quickly, making the dark cabin feel safe and cozy. It does not take long for them to feel the comforting warmth. The men begin to relax in the gentle glow, amazed by such high-level elemental control, which is incredibly rare. The old captain realizes that he finally understands those ancient legends he used to hear about the true power of mages. Those old stories claimed humans serve mages and mages rule over them, but they also protect them. The ship presses on until they finally reach Kamad, the biggest city in the northern Emerald Desert. As we watch, workers begin unloading crates from the vessel. The captain hands Kim some cash, saying that even though it is not much, it is for his services. He explains that the crew pooled this money together from the profits of selling the pirate ship, and insists he takes it to avoid angering the gods. Kim accepts the reward and promises that if they ever cross paths again, he will buy them a real feast. Hearing this, the sailors start chanting his name, calling him Sir Knight. They all bid him a loud farewell, saying they will truly miss him. The captain bows low, showing deep respect and gratitude for his help. Kim watches them go, thinking to himself that they are a fun bunch. He enters the city, where locals are busy going about their daily routines in the streets. Kim walks through town, keeping an eye on the bustling crowd around him. Suddenly, he senses something strange and gazes sharply in one direction. He spots a highly unusual figure in the crowd, glowing with a bright blue light. The stranger stands out completely from everyone else. Kim decides to approach them, politely calling out to get their attention. The person turns around, asking if he is a knight of the Dur family. The knight quickly turns around, bows to Tran, and says he is at his service. Tran introduces himself, explains where he is coming from, and says he wants to meet their family head. Before long, the two of them arrive outside a truly massive mansion. Before we know it, Tran is sitting comfortably, dressed in some seriously elegant clothes. The man sitting across from him compliments his look, saying the outfit suits him incredibly well. This man who radiates power is Cal Dur, head of the family. For a moment, it feels like they are having a silent standoff, sizing each other up. Facing this intense pressure, Tran refuses to back down and stares right back. Ever the good host, the head of the house start the conversation by asking for his guest's name and family background. Tran introduces himself and reveals he comes from a fallen lineage of guardians. He gets straight to the point, saying he has heard about their magical beasts and wants to buy one. Cal stands up and lets him know his daughter will handle the negotiations from here. Tran cannot help his curiosity, speaking up to ask Cal if he has ever met someone who looked just like him before. Tran's curiosity grows when he notices the older man hesitate for a split second upon hearing the question. Cal admits that Tran does indeed remind him of someone from his past. After that, Tran is led away by Cal's daughter, who admits she initially thought he was just some ruined noble. She adds that since he is buying magical beasts and comes from a guardian bloodline, he must be doing quite well for himself as a mercenary. While the girl keeps talking, Tran is distracted, still thinking about what her father just said. He desperately wants to find out something about his parents, remembering details like curly hair, slightly large ears, and a straight jaw. Since his mother's features were very common, he figures the person Cal knew in the past might actually be his father. Tran is lost in thought for a while until the young woman snaps him out of it and tells him to follow her. Together, we watch them get ready to enter the family. Leaving the stable, they walk down a long hallway and step into a massive room. Seeing so many beasts living in enclosures that mimic their natural habitat gets Tran incredibly excited. He thinks the entire facility is absolutely amazing. He notes how every room mimics the perfect environment for each creature. It is super impressive, but Tran soon starts worrying about the potential cost. Following the woman deeper inside, he wonders if he should just forget this idea. Maybe buying a magical beast is simply too much. Then, suddenly, the two of them halt. Tran keeps fretting that there is no way he can afford this since he does not have a chest of gold. Right then, A pair of massive black wings inside a nearby cage catches his attention. The creature sitting inside seems remarkably calm, watching Tran with intense focus. Its eyes are incredibly vibrant and sharp, feeling a spark of hope. Tran asks the woman about the price, looking closely at the beast. He figures it as a total bargain, even if it drains his pockets. He asks the woman what kind of special ability the creature possesses. She responds that the creature is highly intelligent, but there is a catch. While it belongs to a highly popular species, this smart bird has issues. It refuses to obey anyone it deems dumber than itself. As she explains this, the beast keeps its gaze locked onto Tran, who stares right back, wondering if the bird actually understands their conversation. He wants to test its intellect, despite that grumpy expression on its face. The woman confirms its cleverness, mentioning she even tried teaching it to read. But that failed. She feels it is a complete waste because the beast is physically strong, well-sized, and has hunted other creatures before. It simply needs to learn some discipline. If it would actually cooperate, it would easily be worth double or triple the price. Suddenly it seems the bird is trying to communicate something directly to Cal. The woman gets goosebumps, shocked by this sudden shift. Cal then points to himself, asking the bird if it truly wants to serve him. He finds it strange, knowing he is nothing special right now. There must be a reason. He lays down one clear condition first. If bought, the beast must put everything into learning how to read. The bird nods obediently. Cal immediately initiates the binding spell, casting a long-term contract. Moments later, the bird perches on his arm. The family head is deeply impressed to see this once wild, stubborn beast fully submitting to Cal's authority. Nodding in approval, he tells Cal to raise it well. However, something else is on his mind. He asks Cal if he has any connection to Lord Talai's. Cal shakes his head, having absolutely no clue who that man is. Observing his genuine reaction, the host tells him to ignore it. Though they drop the subject, Cal wonders if there is a resemblance. He decides to seize the opportunity and ask a question of his own. Pulling a folded piece of paper from his pocket, he presents it. He asks the host if he recognizes the woman depicted in the sketch. It is a portrait of his mother. The man studies the image closely. No names come to mind. He comments that if he had ever met such a beautiful woman, he definitely wouldn't forget her. Cal thanks him, deciding to let the bird fly around for a bit. Once the payment clears, the deal is officially done. Now Cal just needs to grab his new pet and head out. But first, he wants to make sure everything works. He grabs onto the bird's talons to go for a quick spin. The creature immediately takes off, carrying Cal down the road at high speed. He hangs onto its feet as they fly, absolutely loving the rush. After a while, he heads back and the servants serve him a great meal. The girl who helped with the deal asks if he had a good trip. Then she decides to introduce Cal to the rest of the crew. A man covered in scars asks if that place is anywhere near Arabian. The girl snaps at him, telling him not to lump their noble guest in with those vultures. After getting scolded, the man introduces himself and mentions he comes from a historic lineage. The two of them share a firm handshake, but the grip is way too tight to be just a friendly greeting. The giant instantly notices Cal's incredible strength. As expected of a guardian, he's seriously tough. The woman asks to see the bird he bought, but Cal explains that he already let it fly free. However, he mentions he can call it back whenever he needs to. All he has to do is call, and the massive bird will appear in an instant. She gets super interested in the bird and tries to touch it, but the eagle aggressively snaps at her, making it clear it won't tolerate being touched by someone like her. Getting rejected like that, the woman's only reaction is to start cursing out the bird. The eagle gets incredibly pissed off, but Tran steps in and tells it to calm down. After that little scene, they are served a massive feast. The spread looks like it was made for royalty, and as they eat, they start talking about the appearance of the dark elves in the west. They talk about the Arbian subjugation force and mention that their commander is named Mesa. The dinner goes on as they chat about this and other rumors. The obnoxious woman keeps talking trash, saying that the rival family's commander is incredibly ugly. She also mentions they have an heir who lives a very comfortable, sheltered life. Tan just listens with his head down until the name Lord Talai's comes up. Tran cuts in and asks who exactly this Lord Talai's is. They explain that he's the younger brother of the family head, and the current second in command of House Zahar, meaning he's the one actually running the show. Tran starts to realize that his father might be someone way more important than he ever imagined. While he's lost in thought, the eagle tries to get his attention. The bird uses its beak to write in the dirt, trying to show off what it learned, but Tran is completely distracted by his own thoughts. He keeps worrying about what will happen if that powerful man really is his father. He's terrified that the moment that family finds out he exists, they'll crush him like a bug. Shaking it off, he finally looks down at the bird. The eagle had written Black Eagle in the dirt. Tran reads it and points out that its spelling is a bit off. Then he asks if it has picked out a name yet. The eagle writes not yet on the ground. Tran teases it, asking if its name is going to be not yet. The eagle looks totally offended and shakes its head no. Tran. He chuckles, asking the eagle to explain. The bird scribbles on the dirt that it likes Tran. He pats his bird, telling it there is still plenty of studying left to do. Even so, he cannot stop dwelling on its message. Just then, a man approaches, inviting Tran to tag along on a quick hunt to warm up. Tran explains he is leaving today, and the guy puts on a disappointed, whining that Tran should have given him a heads up since they are supposed to be friends. Tran sees right through the act. The guy just wants to show off and flex his strength. The eagle glares at the man who boasts about knowing the region inside and out, offering to guide Tran if necessary. Tran politely declines, and the man turns to leave, telling him to reach out if he changes his mind. Tran finds it strange that the man surrendered so easily, leaving him feeling highly uneasy. Afterward, he heads over to a nearby building. Once they step inside, Tran says he did not need an escort, but the man explains he is merely following his lord's orders. Tran approaches the counter and requests a desert guidebook along with religious texts on ENL. He places 2 items down, offering them as his payment for the books. Tran quickly exits the fortress, holding his new volume close. He notes that while the map inside is awful, the Britso Zahar book was funded by the main house, meaning the information should still be highly useful. Suddenly, he senses a strange movement and glances off to the side. It is the same mysterious energy from before. Both Tran and his eagle immediately sense something suspicious. Suddenly, the massive gates swing open and, just like that, Tran is outside the fortress. Once they reach a safe distance away, he advises his eagle that they should probably slow down a bit. The eagle shakes its head, clearly disapproving of the idea, but Tran explains that he simply wants to walk for a while. Meanwhile, an owl watches them. From a distance, the bird perches on a branch as Tran and his eagle pass by. That is when Tran notices something off and stops to analyze the situation. He calls out, demanding whoever is following him to show themselves. A man steps out of hiding, asking if Tran knew he was there all along. He points at the eagle, asking if Tran is stupid for walking instead of riding his massive bird. The man claims he saw a young traveler all alone and just wanted to help. Tran cuts straight to the chase, asking if the man is after his mana. Dolph scrambles to concoct a lie. With a creepy smirk, the man asks if Tran really ventured out here alone, knowing how dangerous it is. Tran mutters that he finally understands why nobles utterly despise ruined, bankrupt nobles. Dolph's grin widens as he laughs at hearing that from someone whose situation is just as bad, if not worse. Dolph knows Tran possesses powerful mana, but his physical body is incredibly weak. Tran agrees, saying that even with a weak body, his overflowing mana makes him the perfect prey. He then signals his eagle to take flight. The man listens closely to what Tran is saying. Tran begins releasing his mana, remarking that he successfully lured his opponent out. As Tran starts to vanish from sight, the man licks his lips, thinking this will make for a delicious meal. Dolph chuckles, dismissing it as cheap concealment magic used by useless. He deployed knights to spy on people, warning Tran to stop running and bragging that dealing with concealment magic was child's play. But suddenly the man realized he couldn't sense any presence at all. His eyes widened in realization as a terrifying possibility crossed his mind. Out of nowhere, an attack flew right at him. Dolph had no idea what was happening, wondering where that stone even came from. Before he could react, another strike flew in, hitting him dead on. An even heavier blow slammed right into his stomach. Desperately, he tried to guard against the incoming barrage. Finally, he unleashed his magic, conjuring a ring of fire all around him. Dolph figured if he could just light up the area, he would break his opponent's stealth, and then he would only need one Solid hit, suddenly a fireball appeared in the sky, but not just one. 6 massive fireballs formed high above, immediately starting to rain down on his opponent, but right then the confident smirk vanished from Dolph's face, replaced by pure dread. The attack landed a direct hit, and Dolph channeled mana into his feet, stomping the ground to desperately escape the blast. With that, the fireballs vanished, but he was still badly hurt and screamed at the protagonist to stop hiding and show himself. Dolph kept shouting, completely losing his patience while looking around frantically to find a way out. He was so incredibly tense that sweat started pouring down his face, realizing he had to run since there was no way he could win this fight. Dolph knew that battling a mage of that bloodline in the middle of a desert put him at a massive disadvantage. He even ripped off his shirt just to flee faster, figuring that unless his opponent possessed a bloodline with physical stats as insane as his own, they would never be able to catch up. But then suspicion crept in, and he looked up at the sky to make sure. High above, he spotted Ian clinging to his eagle's talon, and the beast looked absolutely furious, since Dolph had been nothing but a massive pain. Ian remarked that someone like Dolph should have died a long time ago, unless he was carrying some kind of magical artifact. Terrified, the man begged Ian for mercy. Ian paused, considering it for a brief second, but quickly replied that Dolph knew damn well that wasn't going to happen. Using the eagle's raw fury to his advantage, Ian unleashed a devastating wave of power. The destructive blow hit Dolph head-on, completely crushing him. Ian looked down at Dolph's broken body, realizing the guy was actually much stronger than he anticipated. He reflected that if Dolph were an official guardian of Zahar, his stone-throwing trick might have failed entirely. Ian reached out his hand, declaring that it was finally time for the feast to begin. With that, all of the man's mana began to drain away. Ian absorbed all that magical energy in a single gulp. At the same time, the object strapped to Ian's waist also began drawing in some of the mana. Ian looked down, slightly confused by what was happening. Both he and the eagle watched as the object greedily devoured the energy. Ian realized that this item was capable of storing magical power. He wondered exactly how the artifact worked and decided he would have to examine it more closely later. The eagle prepared to lift Ian into the air once again. Ian shielded his eyes from the sun, looking out toward the horizon as he told himself, knowing the tomb of the gods lay just ahead. Sometime later, in a different town, Ian meets up with an informant who chides him for being incredibly reckless by running away from home, and asks if he faced any bandits or magical beasts. Tran explains that he simply got lucky, then asks how one can gain access to the tomb of the gods, noting he read about a steep entry fee. The informant explains it is usually simple, but right now, entrance is totally blocked. She reveals some high-profile guests arrived a week ago, shutting down the gates entirely. Since then, nobody gets in. She points upward, hinting at some massive political players. These are incredibly powerful people, making Tran highly suspicious of the entire lockdown. Meanwhile, in a dark corner of the ruins, a group of men gather. One of the tense men demands to know where Purga is, and Purga answers that he is right there, telling him to stop shouting. The younger guy blames their entire predicament on Purga, claiming they would be safe if he had not insisted on entering. Purga tells him to stop crying, pointing out that the boy chose to follow him of his own free will. He barks at him to shut up, his mind drifting back to his grandfather's stories about a hidden underground chamber here. Unearthing this secret was supposed to secure his place as family head. He ponders the ancient myths and the true nature of this sanctuary. While he once dismissed it all as mere fairy tales, this clever hiding spot makes him believe that real clues lie within. But before he can think any further, he spots a massive horde of beasts charging straight toward their position. He realizes this secret is a living nightmare. He never would have stepped inside had he known it was crawling with deadly creatures. Desperate, he asks how much water they have left, and the panicked kid admits they are completely dry, leaving him utterly lost. Suddenly, eyes widen as a strange sensation washes over him, though he does not recognize the bizarre language. He understands the mysterious voice with perfect clarity. Nearby, the kid mutters about the Death Hunter, and the man asks if he has returned. The narrative shifts to a new location. Tran believes it is foolish to let a select few handle such a massive task alone, deciding it is best to keep a low profile to avoid any unwanted attention. Slipping away unnoticed, Tran approaches a local merchant to inquire about a strange substance, and the shopkeeper reveals it is saltpeter. Tran recalls hearing about this rare material before. Digging through his pack, he pulls out a reference guide, confident the recipe is hidden somewhere inside. Searching, he discovers they abandoned the project simply because they lacked the necessary ingredients. Curiously, Tran asks the merchant if he carries any sulfur in stock. But the man shakes his head in confusion. Suddenly, another nearby vendor chimes in, explaining that such a mineral only exists near active volcanoes. Tran realizes that if he had known this sooner, he would have searched Kamad first. The merchant offers him some highly sought-after brown sugar instead, but Tran politely declines, explaining he has no sweet tooth. Later, in a secluded clearing, Tran readies his slingshot. He unleashes a shot at a distant boulder, hitting it with devastating impact. He observes that packing sand instead of using solid stones yields incredible results, allowing him to manipulate the projectile's shape in midair, but with only 5 or 6 charges. Every shot must count. Fortunately, this unique method is perfect for binding an enemy's ankles or completely blinding their field of vision. He can't help but wonder what those nobles have been doing inside the tomb for days. Tran thinks it might be smarter to just escape to another city. It seems like the perfect plan. Crouching behind a rock, he realizes he just needs to sneak inside, and if he gets caught, he can always just bolt. Suddenly, Tran hears a sound and quickly hides. 2 guards walk past, chatting about how all that racket is totally unnecessary. One of them casually kicks something on the ground. Tran wonders why the guards are treating those poor people like that. Heading down the stairs, he starts to see shadows moving. Intrigued, Tran decides to peek and see what is happening. He spots a few people surrounding what looks like a prisoner. The captive asks what is happening. Tran listens as another man snaps back, telling the captive that questions are forbidden. He originally thought they were simple kidnappers, but this feels far more sinister. One of the men orders the captive to carry the cargo toward the pit. Tran watches them and hesitates, debating if he should actually enter. Still, the air blowing from within feels surprisingly fresh, so he begins sneaking inside. Tran figures this has to be some type of beast-controlling magic. A mustached man asks if Lord Purga is doing fine. Tran overhears him warning that things will go bad if the Lord's enemies discover this secret. Now everything clicks for Tran. This is the actual reason they have locked down this place for weeks. He takes a second to wrap his head around it. While it looks incredibly dangerous, he senses it might also be a massive opportunity. Their motives do not really matter to him anyway. Tran wants something hidden deep inside. With that, he begins creeping down into the abyss. Suddenly, his vision starts to go totally white. Still, Tran manages to slip inside. With a pounding headache, he realizes he was being a fool. Purga probably is not the type of man to ever return a favor. Suddenly, a distant scream catches his attention. He sees a young man collapse to the ground. Purga claims that everything is going great and orders his men to bring in more outsiders. He also demands they silence that annoying noise since they need to ration food anyway. Seeing all of this, Tran finally connects the dots. He realizes this man is the infamous Purga Zahar, a villain who steals lives just for water without feeling a shred of guilt, would never repay a debt. Tran's eyes widen in horror. He realizes he was dead wrong. He is not the Night Hunter here. A long time ago, massive giants ruled the fertile plains of Enil. Driven by an insatiable thirst, they enslaved humanity and drained their fluids every single day. But everything changed on a pitch-black night when not one light shone in the sky. That is when a hero suddenly appeared, the Night Hunter from Freya's divine tribe. Armed with arrows, he slew the giants and freed humanity. Once and for all, in gratitude, the humans offered him their 3 most beautiful women as brides. Among their descendants, one clan inherited the power to turn invisible. The second faction gained the ability to control shadows, while the third was gifted the power of poison. But after the Night Hunter ascended to the heavens, the 6 siblings began fighting over who would rule the desert. The oldest brother, wielding the power of invisibility, wanted no part in the war and ran away. However, the second brother with shadow control and the third with poison went to war. Ultimately, the eldest brother returned, defeated them both, and claimed absolute dominion over the desert. That man became the founding ancestor of the Zahar clan. Suddenly, a voice asks Tran if he is the Night Hunter. He has no clue why he's hearing that name right now of all Times, Tran wonders if this is connected to the elite Zahar nobles, who entered earlier. He suspects he might also be a distant descendant of theirs. Suddenly, Tran senses something off and whips around. He is certain there is indeed something there. Tran can feel a faint blue energy radiating in the distance. He strains his eyes to identify it. Slowly and silently, he begins creeping closer. Moments later, Tran spots a beast with its back turned. The creature is practically drooling, desperate to devour Tran. He finds the abomination absolutely hideous. Sensing a presence, the beast suddenly snaps round to face him. Tran gasps, realizing he has been spotted. Without wasting a single second, the beast lunges straight at him. Tran notices the monster is exceptionally fast, so he braces for a counterattack. Tran unleashes his power, striking not just one but three monsters simultaneously. The beasts feel the impact, realizing the heat is far too intense. Capitalizing on their distraction, Tran takes a few steps back to regroup. He wonders how these creatures managed to pinpoint his exact location. At least their detection range seems to be fairly short. Tran grabs an object and hurls it into the air. It is one of his stones, since he knows he must maintain the upper hand in this battle. Right after, he unleashes a rapid flurry of attacks. Landing a direct hit, he drops one of the beasts. The remaining monsters do not care at all about their fallen comrade. Tran finds their cold reaction quite intriguing. He watches as the surviving monsters flee, leaving their dead partner behind. Tran reaches out to drain the beast's mana, watching closely to see if it actually succeeds. The creature's mana begins to flow. He realizes it truly is a magical beast. Tran stares at his hand, analyzing everything that is unfolding. The amount of absorbed mana is minuscule. With his current level and stats, he should be able to sense far more energy than this. On top of that, the sacred relic is not even reacting. He wonders what this creature actually is. Tran hears that strange voice again and mutters that he is sick of hearing it. Just then, he senses a different presence and looks over. Hearing approaching footsteps, he quickly slips away. A group of people nears the area. One of the men commands everyone to halt. The group stops immediately and stares at the dead monster on the ground. One asks if their target went this way, but another replies it is impossible to know since they lost their bearings ages ago. Purga warns them that a rat is hiding nearby. One of the men asks if it could be a rescue party, but his comrade replies that anyone entering this area would make too much noise, so they would have noticed by now. Purga commands them to set traps around the area. Determined to catch this rat, he commands them to illuminate the area to hunt down the intruder first. However, he quickly changes his mind and cancels the search, deciding to let the target roam a bit longer to serve as monster bait. Tran silently watches as the men walk away. He crosses his arms, lost in thought. Let's look at how pathetic this group is. 3 days pass with Tran and Purga's squad living in constant tension inside the labyrinth. Thanks to his sacred artifact's vision, Tran can easily see that the traps they set are meant for him, but ironically, Purga's own men are the ones who end up falling right into them. Tran begins marking the ground to keep track of where he has already been. Some of the paths are completely blocked by a massive horde of strain beasts. He decides to let Purga's group clear the path ahead for him. Missing out on draining their mana is no major loss, considering the tiny amount he would get from them is pathetic anyway. He just watches them fight off the monsters. Purga's group is already showing signs of total exhaustion. One of the men whines that these beasts just keep coming. Another mutters that if he had known it would be this bad, he would have spared captives earlier. Tran realizes just how utterly despicable these scum really are. More monsters swarm the fray, making the chaos even worse. Tran plans to take advantage of this chaos. While they draw aggro, let's watch him slip away to explore the rest of the dungeon. Suddenly, a massive door looms ahead of him. Tran halts, completely dwarfed by the structure, stunned by the sheer size of the gates. He wonders if this might be the way out. Suddenly, his eyes snap wide open in shock. A massive eye on the door begins to stir. It asks if he is the chaser hunter, but peering closer, the eye changes its mind and declares that entry is forbidden. It then tilts downward to inspect him further. Its gaze locks onto the item hanging at his waist. Instantly, the entity announces that the conditions are met, asking if he wishes to enter. Tran quietly ponders the bizarre class the door just mentioned. It belongs to a lineage he has not Even awakened yet, the spirit asks once more, demanding to know if he will go. Inside, he realizes that giant eye is not watching him, but rather the unique item he is wearing. He asks what a wave walker is, and the door answers that his query is granted with 0 restrictions. The spirit then explains that it allows underwater breathing and heavily boosts stats in aquatic zones. He then asks what the eye is, and it answers that it is the Gate's spirit. Comparing it to the librarian, Tran asks what lies beyond, why this place was made, and how to escape. The entity explains that whoever gathers all 4 correct types and defeats the labyrinth lord will become Mind Hunter. Tran stands there completely stunned. Suddenly, a strange shift starts. Shaking the heavy door, the spirit mutters about 4 complete types being detected, warning that intruders are close by, issuing immediate judgment. The gate summons the labyrinth lord to appear. Tran tenses up, preparing for a deadly clash. Then the heavy door slowly cracks open. A massive beast steps out from the shadows. Tran is speechless. It is the real boss monster itself. Smirking, the creature brands him a fake and snarls, "All fakes must die." Tran instantly loads his slingshot. He launches a powerful shot right at the beast's face. He follows up by bombarding his opponent with gold and blue magic. The giant crosses its thick arms to shield itself, glaring down at the boy. The boss scoffs, claiming it barely tickled. Tran is definitely realizing he is in deep trouble. Can he survive this absolute beast of a boss? An open clash. The beast commands the boy to stay put, and all the nearby beasts obey their lord's orders. They lunge forward, aiming to tear apart the youth, but he effortlessly dodges each strike, leaping clean through the swarming horde. He bolts. Purga realizes that was an incredibly close call. But as he peers ahead, another creature blocks his escape route. Quickly, he throws up a defensive barrier, but he watches in horror as the beast shatters his shield. Reaching for his blade, he draws the steel. He slashes, landing a solid strike on the creature. As he flees, wild questions race through his mind. Suddenly, the danger level spikes as the massive boss monster blocks his path. Without losing a single moment, the beast swipes at him. Purga barely slides beneath the giant paws and keeps on running. He hopes this nightmare will end once he slays this final adversary. The creature looks annoyed. Meanwhile, Purga begins formulating a desperate strategy. Suddenly, he starts sprinting even faster, pushing forward blindly just to escape that horror. Reuniting with his squad, Purga carves a path through the enemy. He quickly takes up a defensive stance right beside his comrades. Checking in, he asks if they are unhurt. They nod, but then one warrior catches an eerie sound and asks if anyone else can hear it. The other fighters freeze, straining to hear. Slowly, a bizarre silhouette begins to take shape before them. A terrified fighter mutters about the legendary Night Hunter, the devourer of kids, repeating the mad words repeatedly as the massive boss monster finally towers over them. Purga snaps that fairy tales are the least of their concerns right now. They cannot just freeze up. If they hesitate, they will all die. The young warrior freezes, overwhelmed by the pure pressure of the beast. Shaking off their fear, his comrades charge forward to strike the titan. Their only play now is to slay it right here, but the fighter launching the opening strike is effortlessly swatted aside by the massive opponent. It feels as though the giant boss is merely toying with these fighters. 1 rages, screaming at the demon to perish, but it easily shatters his assault. Soon, the entire party is pushed back by the creature's brutal counteroffensive. A warrior realizes this is a terrible omen, especially now that the lesser minions are joining the fray. He knows if this onslaught continues, not a single soul will survive. Suddenly, his eyes dart to the side as he catches a sudden movement. He spots a tiny rodent, desperately struggling just to stay alive. Nearby, another soldier, his eyes burning with fury, tightly grips his battle axe. He rushes ahead, with raw power striking the behemoth's leg, caught totally off guard. The giant stumbles. The reckless fighter laughs in triumph. But a second later, he is crushed and thrown back. His partners' eyes widen in absolute horror. He realizes their defeat is certain, knowing that even if he escapes, his dreams of power are ruined. All of this agony is caused by this beast. He mutters curses, blaming the fiend for his downfall. Suddenly, he draws an object is wedged in the beast's back. Gripping it tight, he starts swinging it. Like a sword charging forward, he goes on the attack once more. With every blow, his strikes grow heavier and more powerful. Suddenly, a brilliant blue light floods the area. Looking at the situation, he realizes there is no other choice. He roars at the beast, telling it to vanish once and for all. The strike actually manages to wound the creature, but the injury only makes the beast even angrier. The warrior realizes things are about to end terribly. For him, the monster effortlessly thrusts its massive hand straight into his stomach. Collapsed on the ground, the youth wonders where he went wrong. The light is already beginning to fade from his eyes, having crushed everyone. He wonders what the creature is watching now, and if it remains unsatisfied. Tran simply watches the horror unfold in silence. Tan stands right before the dying youth, who finally understands he was just a helpless rat in this nightmare all along. The monster glares right at them, claiming it finally found him. Tran readies his weapon, knowing he must channel enough power into the strike. Meanwhile, the gate monster calls Tran a fake knight. Ignoring the useless trash talk, Tran remains completely locked on his target. He pours everything into the blow, but it barely scratches the beast, and that minor scratch only makes the monster curious. Tran quickly analyzes his opponent and realizes he will not be able to drop this thing with one strike. Acknowledging he misjudged the required power, he must fall back and come up with a new strategy. Tran rapidly retreats to put some safe distance between them, which only infuriates the beast, enraged that it got struck by such a weak blow only for its target to flee. Checking his magic compass, Tran concludes his biggest issue is a severe lack of raw firepower. In this desperate situation, he has no choice but to rely on his final alternative. He must move fast because the enemy is closing the gap rapidly, ready to face the giant beast. Tran begins dodging its lethal strikes with swift, agile movements. He starts showing a level of strength far beyond anything he has revealed until now. Positioning his blade, Tran calculates that landing just one slightly deeper cut will let him slay the beast. Meanwhile, the monster shrieks that Tran is evil for slaughtering its offspring and causing so much pain. Tran wants this battle over as quickly as possible, and the creature feels the exact same way. Tran knows his next blow must be the decider, so he channels every ounce of his strength into one ultimate strike, yet even that is not enough to drop the monster in a single blow. The beast screeches in agony, glancing over at the fallen hunters on the ground. Luckily, its torment will not last long, as Tran immediately lunges straight for its throat. The beast screams even louder, but the sheer force Tan puts into his weapon guarantees this will be the end. His blade glows with intense energy, and Tran himself shines, delivering the final furious strike. The creature's screams do not last long before it finally collapses. After exerting such extreme energy, Tran must take a moment to catch his breath and recover. He knows this battle would have been far tougher without the bloodline power he inherited from Dolph. Tran now fully understands how the sacred relic operates. Although he knows little about the Wave Knight, he can tell the mimic ability is indeed active. However, this energy was slowly fading and would likely run out in 30 minutes. Tran looked down at the dying man and saw that his chest and lungs were punctured. He knew there was absolutely nothing he could do to save him. The warrior begged for help, but it was simply impossible. As his desperate pleas faded, his remaining life force slipped away completely, and he died. Tran noted that even a powerhouse as strong as Purga stood zero chance inside this deadly labyrinth, and he was not alone. Every single one of his subordinates and allies met the same brutal end. Now, they would only serve as nourishment for Tran, who remembered Purga as a tyrant who never cared about commoners or his own knights. Yet the man still fought to his last breath against the terrors of the labyrinth. Now, Tran began absorbing Purga's mana, knowing he would remember that name for a very long time. He thoroughly drained the energy from all the corpses and the surrounding environment. After that, Tran checked the sacred compass, noticing a few distinct colors glowing on it. He wondered what combining multiple bloodlines would feel like, but decided it was smarter to leave that experiment for another day. Ultimately, he had already doubled the strength he possessed when he first set foot in the labyrinth. Our hero now wielded a level of power that would take typical nobles 100 years to achieve. Still, he knew he had to discard that compass if he wanted to avoid being hunted down by the Zahars. He also had to sweep his tracks, choosing to deploy searching magic to find and wipe out any evidence of his presence. Using his mana, he began shattering everything he had touched that could reveal his identity. One by one, all signs of his existence vanished. By the end of this long day, he had actually defeated the boss of The labyrinth. Now, Tran stood before that massive door once again, waiting. He wondered if a simple push would do the trick. Sure enough, the heavy door yielded easily, but whatever was waiting on the other side didn't bring Tran any joy. There was only an empty throne and a portal resting in the center of the room, serving as the exit. Right near that seat lay a pristine book. The volume caught Tran's eye, and he realized it was an experimental record of the Night Hunter's ascension path, with the knowledge detailed inside a class. Evolution was highly possible. The pages contained intricate formulas and records. But Tran quickly realized he wouldn't be able to complete this transition entirely by himself. The ancient manual also detailed how the portal was set to trigger as soon as it recognized a compatible user. The designer had even added a special feature to drag that chosen candidate straight inside. Reading further, he saw that the Night Hunter class was actually a hybrid of Hunter, Stalker, Shadow, and Alchemist paths. Now, it finally made sense why he had felt that powerful urge to enter earlier. He scanned the checklist of necessary materials, which demanded rare resources like organs from a rot-jaw beast and biological material from giants. Raw mana would serve as the battery, resolving any potential lifespan issues. By triggering a deep hibernation, he was holding the legendary blueprint for the Ascension of the Earth Mother Goddess, an ancient, failed project from the past. Most of the theoretical notes seemed completely incomprehensible, yet one detail was undeniable. The creator's true purpose was engineering a Night Hunter, all because of the thanks to the sacred relic. The gate mistook him for someone holding all four bloodlines. Even the fire maniac claimed a god showed him how to fake a bloodline. Vaulting into the swirling vortex, he wondered if a person could truly keep a bloodline acquired that way. Tumbling out of the vortex, he hit the hot desert sand. Scanning his surroundings, he realized he was near the edge of Baneful. Suddenly, words started carving themselves into the dirt. His giant eagle was utterly furious because they were over 2 days late. He quieted the beast, adjusted his pack, and prepared to move. Gripping the talons of his loyal companion, he launched into the sky toward his next goal. The bird soared, whipping up a massive dust storm across the dunes. Mid-flight, he mapped out his next target, a key candidate allied with the Zahar leadership. He had to vanish from this desert for a few months, at least until the heat died down. Then he would continue searching for any leads on his mother. He guided the eagle toward their destination, making that his priority. They pushed onward until the scenery abruptly transformed into a frozen, icy wasteland. They had entered the gray zone, the ancient battlefield where Arabian and Zahar forces once clashed. Gazing below, he was shocked to find a massive tide of refugees on the run. It seemed as if they were fleeing some terror, completely abandoning the gray city of Kalamoth. The handful of sentries left behind stared in utter disbelief at his sudden arrival. A peculiar youth carrying an eagle wearing bizarre garments cut a striking figure. The local guards closely studied his features, seemingly recognizing him from somewhere. They immediately bowed, offered apologies, and asked if he was from a noble family. He knew their sudden respect came because they recognized his magic. He resolved to dress more modestly in the future, though he simply told them he was merely a traveler. When he requested lodging from the local ruler, the guards explained that the city was leaderless. Keeping his head down, a guard revealed that their former lord had perished in a brutal raid by Western Dark Elves. He added that no nobles or knights remained to govern the region. Suddenly, the sentry fell to his knees and desperately pleaded at his feet, begging him to take command of the city. Roy was caught completely unprepared, as he was only passing through to complete his task. He felt the sudden request was far too heavy, especially since he refused to be anchored to this desolate region. Yet he could not ignore their desperate plight, so he asked the guard to explain everything. Inside a private room, the man explained that it started 3 weeks ago. Several dead beast hunters were discovered on the western road, and their steel blades had been sheared in half with one clean strike. Since the site was only a day away, they dispatched 2 knights to investigate, but 3 days passed with no sign of them. The man added that even the Lord's own son rode west with a squad of knights, and not a single soul returned. Only a single mangled knight crawled back, and right before he died, the only word he could gasp out was spirit. Fearing it, everyone fled, terrified that those beasts would return and devour the remaining villagers. As Roy asks about the neighboring towns, the youth tells him that they dispatched several messengers begging for help, but every single plea was rejected. Roy figures the neighboring towns are probably just too terrified of being targeted themselves, and he cannot blame them for making the logical choice. Roy stands up saying he understands their plight, but feels this entire mess is just too massive for him to handle alone. Instantly, the youth drops to his knees begging for mercy, crying that the valley's sheep desperately need a shepherd. This immediately reminds Roy of a woman who once explained how nobles and commoners are like sheep. He asks if that comparison is common around these parts, and the youth nods, explaining that everyone here uses those terms. The nobles are the shepherds, the knights are the sheep, dogs and the commoners are the flock. Roy wonders if his own mother was actually born here, or at least lived in this territory. He reaches down to grab his bag, showing a portrait of a woman to the youth, asking if he recognizes her, a girl named Mage, around 20 years old. The young man apologizes, admitting he doesn't know her, but offers to spread search posters throughout the entire town. Roy realizes that to find his mother, he must first save this settlement. He tells the young man he cannot become the new lord of the town, but he agrees to act as their protector. Hearing this, the youth is flooded with relief and joy. Roy then announces to the villagers that he will stay for a time, guarding them until the threat from the west is eliminated. A young villager in the crowd mutters that their savior has finally arrived to rescue them, but another resident scoffs, saying that while the man might look handsome, monsters won't simply run away from a pretty face. Right then, another person snaps at the doubter to shut up and show some respect to their protector. Roy realizes they aren't mocking him, they are simply terrified. The townspeople don't want to get their hopes up only to face disappointment again. He figures that to reassure the sheep, the shepherd must display his strength, so he decides to show them a direct demonstration of his power. The crowd instantly stops bickering to watch what Roy will do next. Roy raises his hand to channel his energy, intending to run a brief test. First, he begins compressing the fire as tightly as possible. Right after, he lowers the temperature of the flames. Since he holds no ill will toward the townspeople, he decides to focus on staging a spectacular visual show. Massive blast of radiant light and energy bursts forth. Moments later, Roy expands the radius of his magic to its absolute limits. The unleashed force is so intense that the nearby villagers must shield their faces. After a few moments, the crowd begins looking up to see what happened. The villagers are utterly spellbound, muttering that the sky itself appears to be on fire. Everyone bursts into cheers, finally realizing they might actually make it. Looking down, Tran realizes this display alone is enough to send the crowd into absolute ecstasy, or at least that is what he believes. In reality, they are still facing a mountain of challenges, endless meetings, and the freezing cold. Things are escalating fast. If he doesn't cut this meeting short, it will drag on until morning. Tran silences the crowd, announcing he will handle the food shortage himself. They trust him completely, but no one has any clue how their protector plans to pull it off. His plan is to herd local beasts straight into the city, make hot soup for everyone, and then salt the remaining meat for the winter. The locals can barely imagine that someone with godlike strength would waste their magic on mundane chores. Tran explains that the northern nobles do the same, casting lightning over fields after a harvest just to fertilize the soil. This is no different. He leaps onto his giant eagle and takes off. From up high, it is obvious that all those glowing spots in the mountains are beasts. Using his magic, he commands them to herd in one direction and gather right outside the gates. After giving the command, Tan flies over the area to ensure they are actually obeying. Gazing down, he thinks this is no harder than herding ordinary sheep. When the mountain folk, who are used to constant hunger and freezing winter, see the massive herd, they are absolutely speechless. They can barely believe their eyes, wondering why their old rulers never did this for them before. They assume Tran must be a legendary mages, and they quickly begin butchering the beasts to share the meat. Standing in front of a massive mansion, Tran commands them to unlock the doors for anyone who has been displaced. This command leaves everyone baffled, wondering where their new master is supposed to sleep. They are shocked when Tran says the town hall is perfect since it already has a bed. The citizens whisper about how incredibly kind their leader is, sacrificing his comfort to feed and Shelter them all. Honestly, Tran does not care about being worshipped, he just wants the city running smoothly so he can find clues about his missing mother, news of his legendary deeds spreads like wildfire across the land. Inside Big Castle, Scout informs the Lord that the new protector has already dispatched trade caravans. The Lord of Big listens to the report and wonders how young this new ruler actually is. Rumors also spread to Balan Castle, where they whisper about the kid who cast a spell that illuminated the night sky. They assume someone so young with that level of magic must have either gotten insanely lucky or been trained by a powerful family since childhood. Meanwhile, over at Heron Castle they are grumbling that this is the absolute worst time for him to arrive. Right alongside Arabian's army, since every territory knows him by a different name. It is impossible to pin down which clan he actually belongs to, while Tran keeps rebuilding the city. Both enemies and allies agree it is best to play long for now. Without him even realizing it, the Lords of the Grey Zone end up recognizing Tran as the true protector of Kalamoth as he maps out his next moves. Tran stares quietly at the portrait of his mother. There are 8 cities and over 100 villages in this region, and he knows there is a chance she is somewhere in this vast territory. Suddenly, an aide bursts in with urgent new information. The messenger apologizes for last week's false alarms, but promises that this aid is the real deal. It is about a traveler named Igan, who claims a woman looking exactly like the portrait stayed at his place 10 years ago. Tran is thrilled because the timeline matches up perfectly with when his mother first went missing. Right then, a crowd gathers to thank him for the food and shelter. Tan patiently listens to everyone, but his sole priority today is speaking with that traveler to learn if he actually met his mother. The traveler explains that before losing everything, he ran in. Back then, the city was in total chaos from a brutal clan war. Nobody knew when the next sudden strike would land, leaving everyone living in constant terror. During that chaotic time, a young woman arrived at his inn. He remembers she looked only about 20 years old and was heavily pregnant. She seemed incredibly on edge, like she was running from someone. Back then, he wondered what kind of coward would abandon a beautiful pregnant woman like that. When Tran asks why he thought she was abandoned, the man says he overheard her cradling her stomach and whispering to herself. He still remembers her exact desperate words to her unborn baby, begging him not to grow up like his father. She then asked for directions heading west, clearly an outsider to those lands. Even her mount seemed to come from somewhere incredibly far away. It was a magnificent beast with a stunning golden coat that easily turned heads. You could instantly spot its rare lineage. Later, back in his quarters, Tran knows it is too early to be sure, but it is highly probable that woman was indeed his mother. Still, her parting words puzzle him. Why did she beg him not to become like his father? Suddenly, Tran catches a sudden movement nearby and looks over to see the eagle writing. She asks if he is hurting. Once he reassures her, she writes that he always looks miserable whenever BJ is mentioned. Tran is amazed by how sharp the bird is and asks if she remembers his mother, but she declines. He gently pets the bird and says they are actually quite similar, since he lost his mother long ago too. The eagle stares at Tran in silence after hearing this. Seconds later, she begins scribbling once more. She shows him her message, writing that her name is now BJ. Tran is totally baffled by this choice. The eagle writes that she wants that name because he gets so down knowing BJ is gone. He asks if she is trying to replace his mother, warning her that names carry weight. Still, the eagle insists she has decided and truly wants to be BJ. Tran finally gives in, saying that if she truly desires it that much, then from now on she is officially BJ, which makes her incredibly happy. He tells her he is counting on her. Tran opens the window, saying they have rested enough. Gripping the eagle, the two soar high into the sky to start patrol. Below them, civilians cheer and call out for him to guard their city forever. Hearing their shouts, Tran silently notes that he cannot remain here forever, and delaying his departure will only hurt. That is exactly why he avoided putting down roots. With those thoughts, the two begin their rounds, with Tran focusing his senses on the area. Strangely, Tran detects absolutely no sign of dark elves nearby, and wonders if they have fled. If they are gone, things will get complicated. That's a huge problem. If the enemy stayed, they could just crush them all, but if they moved, a counterattack could come anytime. As he glances to the side, a strange sensation hits him. he senses a Mage. With twice his own mana capacity, suddenly that massive power starts. Charging straight at him, Tran reacts instantly, telling his eagle to fly south immediately. As the approaching Mage draws near, Tran recognizes the flying style. He is stunned when he realizes who it actually is, this terrifying Mage. Is Mesa. She is also completely shocked to run into Tran here. They both descend and land on the grass. Mesa notes it has only been 3 months since they last met, but he has changed a lot. She tells him he looks like a totally different person now, saying he looks like a real adult. Craving attention, the eagle pecks at Tran and starts writing a quick message. Asking who this woman is, amused, Tran introduces them, hearing her name, BJ. The eagle puffs up with pride when they praise her writing skills. Mesa calls their bond beautiful, admitting she would love to find a companion like that too. Then she asks why he is out here since traveling round this area has gotten dangerous lately. Tran explains his entire situation to her. Mesa understands his story, but fears her own people might actually be responsible since a necromancer escaped during the destruction of an underground kingdom. She suspects this same necromancer is the culprit, having fled far east to rebuild his army while hiding in the land of the blind dwarves. Tran asks if she means the legendary blind dwarves from the old stories. Mesa confirms this, feeling relieved that he didn't venture any further east. Explaining they cannot enter the gray zone for several reasons, Tran asks if the danger keeping them out is Zahar, and Mesa confirms that is exactly it. She explains she must leave since she has been away too long, bidding him farewell. Mesa promises she wants to hear more about his journeys next time they meet. Then she takes flight, heading back toward her destination. Watching her go, Tran notices his eagle writing on the dirt once more. The message says that Mesa's personality suits her well. Tran playfully asks the bird if she would have chosen Mesa if she had met her first. Flustered, the eagle quickly writes that she chose him and Mesa never had a chance because he makes her happy. After that, Tran knows the situation still deserves some deep thought. He wonders about one highly specific mystery. He wants to understand why both he and Mesa share such a strong compatibility with the beast. Later, Tran is back in Kalamoth, busy training his magic, until an attendant announces that noble visitors have arrived. Seeing his confusion, the messenger quickly explains that multiple high-ranking nobles have arrived, acting as representatives from some neighboring cities. As they file in, the leader of the delegation greets Tran, requesting to be received as guests. Tran replies that he will host them, but first demands to know why they came looking for him. A man bearing a crest steps forward, offering to speak on behalf of the entire group. He reveals they want to propose a grand marriage alliance between their 7 families. And the Lord of Kalamoth, they hope to offer their daughters as concubines, insisting they are all beautiful, well-educated, and ready to support his family. Tan realizes these nobles only showed up for their share, now that the danger has passed. With the threat from the west gone, one noble points out a crucial fact. You need loyal knights to rule, and merging their family lines would create a mighty alliance. Tran thanks them for the generous offer, but politely turns them down. Instead, he makes a counteroffer, whichever family tracks down the most valuable clues about a woman who passed through 20 years ago will win the right to rule Kalamoth. The nobles are completely baffled by this. They cannot believe he would surrender an entire city just for information on a single woman. But Tran adds one vital condition. The future ruler must vow to protect the innocent people of Kalamoth or lose their power. Hearing this, a confused noble asks why he cares so much, especially since he has already done far too much for the commoners already. Tran simply smiles and admits he does not really know why either. He explains that when it comes down to it, he is just a simple valley shepherd. In his heart, his only wish was to tend his sheep in peace. But just as he relaxes, a sudden movement up ahead catches his eye. He detects the overwhelming pressure of an incredibly strong knight who just arrived. Unannounced, realizing someone is breaking in, he prepares to intercept them. Tran leaps across the rooftops, racing to stop the intruder. The moment he arrives, he shouts to get the intruder's attention. The figure slowly turns round to face him. The second Tan recognizes the unexpected visitor. He freezes. Absolute shock. Standing right there in front of him is Kior.